We go from brand new technologies to improvements on an old classic. The LA Department of Sanitation is making additions to their fleet of trucks, and it's making collection of oversized items much easier. Check this out.
We are in the East Valley Sanitation Yard. Lo que usamos aquí es, hay varias diferentes trocas que hacen diferentes trabajos. Trajo lo que llamamos un side loader, que recoge los botes de las residenciales, la basura residencial. Cuando la gente pone sus botes enfrente, es de basura, es de recycle, es de lo verde.
I'm currently sitting in one of our latest vehicles that we purchased. This vehicle here is equipped with natural gas powered engine. It actually is rated to produce less than 0.02 emissions.
This is a front loader, and we do bulky items. We pick up bulky items from the residents. And it's a Peterbilt. It's a 520, and it actually has one side on the right to drive.
This truck is one of our latest additions to our fleet. We also started using them in our Clean Streets Los Angeles program. And instead of having to send a whole big dump truck in that setup, we could take this vehicle and
Councilmember Paul Koretz of the 5th District is voicing his opposition to two new bills introduced by the state Senate. As Mr. Koretz explains, these measures don't seem like what is needed to help LA's ongoing housing crisis.
I'm proud to join you virtually to stand up in opposition to Senate Bills 9 and 10. It's a fight to prioritize affordable housing over luxury buildings in order to produce and preserve units for Californians of all incomes. So what exactly would occur if these bills are passed? It overrides local development standards, public participation, and forces local jurisdictions to adopt substandard laws. First, a few realities though. Most California cities and counties are in dire need of more affordable housing. But I can tell you that consistently these bills miss the mark in obvious ways and will only degrade our communities. SB 9 and 10 focus on producing market rate units, in contradiction to the vast majority of California's locally adopted general plans and housing elements, which contain detailed goals, policies, objectives, and programs crafted by our local governments to guide the development of very low, and moderate housing production. Let's propose some measures to actually address the real shortage, which is not luxury housing. The real shortage is low-income housing, moderate workforce housing. And I think we can propose changes in our local zoning to actually produce what we need to keep people off the street, to allow people to live near where they work. Let your state legislators know we're not ignoring the real problems. We're trying to address them. But these bills and destroying neighborhoods is not the answer.
It's usually the case that a recording artist thanks the Grammys after they get the award. But with programs like Grammy Camp and Grammy Career Day, some notable artists have the Grammys to thank for starting them on their road to greatness. And even in the middle of the pandemic, the Grammy Museum has remained dedicated to offering music education and resources.
The Grammy Museum is located in downtown Los Angeles at LA Live. We have 35,000 square feet of interactive exhibit space. We also have online exhibits, our virtual education programs, and our Grammy in the Schools programming. So we're a very interactive, very educational institution. We've actually had Maren Morris, Billie Eilish, Phineas all go through our education programs. So if you look back all the way to high school days for some of these artists, they've benefited from the Grammy Museum. We closed our doors on March 13th, and I sent a note to the whole team right after that, and I said, our doors may be closed, but our mission is not. So we need to continue engaging the public. We need to continue educating students. So we created Grammy Museum at Home just a few days after that. And since then, we've had more than 55 lesson plans now that teachers and students and parents can use and experience at home or in the classroom or in a virtual setting. We have more than 20 virtual exhibits on our website. We just released our own app, our own official streaming service called Collection Live, which has dozens and dozens of artist interviews from our archives going back over a decade to also, interviews just like this, what we've done with artists over Zoom or WebEx all over the world since we've closed. So the Grammy Museum has changed quite a bit over the years. We opened in 2008, and actually right before the closure, so the fall of 2019, we renovated 3/4 of the museum. So for a lot of Angelenos or a lot of tourists that have been to the museum before may not have experienced, because we were just open for 4 months after the renovation before we had to close. And we've had more than 1 million hits on our website and on our digital channels to experience all of our content. 2021, I think, looks very promising for us. We'll reopen. We're positioned to reopen stronger. We're positioned to reopen and welcome everyone back. I think we're all yearning for that opportunity to be with our friends, be with our families, be with our classmates, celebrate music, to go to the theater, to walk galleries. And I think that that's going to be something that's incredibly exciting. And I personally will be in the lobby welcoming everyone back on the first day.
In our feature story this week, we spotlight a nonprofit dedicated to the preservation of Los Angeles' historical and vintage city structures. Kevin Ju dropped by the Channel 35 studios to tell us all about Project Restore LA. When we think of legacy, we think about people and places. Historical sites and landmarks inform the personality and essence of a city. Project Restore LA is a non-for-profit whose mission is to restore and preserve the civic integrity of Los Angeles. With us today is Kevin Ju, who is the Chief Operating Officer of Project Restore LA. Thank you so much for being here, Kevin.
It's my pleasure, Natalia.
So tell us a little bit about the organization, how it started, and what's your role in it?
Sure. So Project Restore is a nonprofit, and it is dedicated to the restoration and preservation of historic city-owned buildings.
Can you pick one project that is your favorite?
I have a few, but City Hall, of course, has to be at the top, only because it is the largest project I had ever been involved with. It was the most complex project. It's used by the most people, it's visited by the most people, and the quality of the materials and the workmanship are just incredible. And so it was an honor to work there, and honestly, I do believe it is the best looking building on the city skyline.
I was wondering about reaching to the younger generations.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think it's important for the younger generations to value the restoration process that you're in charge of?
Well, for myself, I'm like a big believer in history and knowing it and understanding it, because that way, you don't make the same mistakes that others have made in the past. You need to learn from those. A second thing is, to me, is sort of like sustainability, because when you think about it, there's no building that's as sustainable as the one you already have.
The LA Opera is bringing residents of LA a whole new experience in music with digital shorts. This music series pairs up teams of talented visual artists, including animators, experimental filmmakers and choreographers to create imaginative and innovative short vocal works. Dynamic composers like Tamar Kali, Carlos Simon, and others collaborate in the making of exciting new works. Don't miss LA Opera's digital shorts. For more information, visit laopera.org. The Los Angeles Public Library continues its 5th season of LA Made, a cultural series featuring free music, dance, theater, and conversations with local entertainers at libraries throughout the city. The library kicks off its 2021 programming with The Making of Reverberations. Tune in as performers Donnie Silver Simons and Michelle Green Wilner discuss the making of the multi-sensory work exploring the deception of the Kristallnacht of 1938. Don't miss this powerful presentation of The Making of Reverberations, debuting on LAPL's YouTube channel and Facebook page on Thursday, January 28th at 4 p.m. If music and dance are your passion, this LA Soundscape series is for you. The Ford is proud to present Blue 13 Dance Company. The Blue 13 Dance Company is the country's premier contemporary Indian dance ensemble and LA's longest-running program of Bollywood and Bhangra-style classes. Enjoy inspired dance works and demonstrations that all at once entertain and educate all ages. And it's waiting for you anytime online. LA Soundscape's Blue 13 Dance Company is available to enjoy for free by visiting theford.com. And that's a look at some virtual things to do.
That's it for this edition. I'm Natalia Bilbao. From all of us here at LA This Week, thank you so much for joining us. A reminder that you can catch us online at lacityview.org, and we're also on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. See you next time for more LA This Week.
Good morning and welcome to the Los Angeles City Council. Today is Wednesday, January 27th. I'm Noreen Martinez, the President of the City Council. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Blumenfield.
Blumenfield present.
Bonin.
Present. Second.
Buscaino.
Here.
Cedillo.
Present.
De Leon.
Here.
Harris Dawson.
Present.
Koretz.
Present.
Krikorian.
Here.
Lee.
Present.
Martinez.
Present.
O'Farrell.
Present.
Price. Price. Rahman.
Here.
Ridley Thomas.
Here.
Rodriguez. Rodriguez. 14 members present and a quorum, Madam President.
First order of business.
Approval of the minutes of January 26.
Mr. Krikorian moves and Mr. Lee seconds. Next.
Commendatory resolutions for approval.
Mr. Harris Dawson moves and Mr. Bonin seconds. Next.
Madam President, would council like all items to go forthwith today?
Without objection, that will be the order. Next.
Thank you. Items 1 and 2 are items for which public hearings have been held. For item number 1, the Budget and Finance Committee report has been submitted and uploaded to council file number 20-1632. Items 3 through 9 are items for which public hearings have not been held. 10 votes are required for consideration.
Okay, members, without objection, that would be the order. Those items are now before us. Do you wish to call any of these items special? We are holding item number 9 on the desk. We have a presentation. Any other items? I see none. Let's go ahead and vote on items 1 and 2. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Blumenfield.
Madam President, before we do that, let me just note that there's a slight problem on the agenda. It's a simple mistake. It refers to the firm representing the county. It's obviously representing the city since we're approving it. And as the contract attached to the council file shows, the matter seeks
Mr. City Attorney, I'm not sure anybody can hear you.
Oh.
You just bring the microphone a little closer to you. Go ahead.
So the agenda refers to the firm representing the county. It obviously is referring to the city since we're approving it. And as the contract in the council file shows, the matter seeks authority to have the firm represent the city along with the firm's existing county client, which is the County of LA Development Authority. I just wanted to make that clarification.
Let's go ahead and prepare to vote on item 1 and 2. Please call the roll.
Blumenfield.
Blumenfield, aye.
Bonin.
Bonin, aye.
Buscaino.
Yes. Stupid.
Cedillo. Cedillo.
Cedillo, aye.
De Leon.
Cedillo, aye. De Leon, aye.
Harris Dawson.
Yes.
Koretz.
Aye.
Krikorian.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Martinez. O'Farrell.
Aye.
Price.
Aye.
Rahman.
Aye.
Ridley Thomas.
Aye.
Rodriguez.
14 ayes. These items are adopted.
Let's go ahead and move on to public comment. Madam Clerk, can you please read the information and followed by the City Attorney?
Thank you. As indicated on the agenda, members of the public wishing to offer public comment should call 669-254-5252 and use meeting ID number 160-535-8466 and then press pound. Then press pound again when prompted for participant ID. Once admitted into the meeting, press star 9 to request to speak. Finally, when you hear the last 4 digits of your phone number called out, press star 6. Let me repeat. Call 669-254-5252 and use meeting ID number 160-535-8466 and then press pound. Then press pound again when prompted for participant ID. Once admitted into the meeting, press star 9 to request to speak. Finally, when you hear the last 4 digits of your phone number called out, press star 6.
To members of the public calling in, when it's your turn to speak, please state which of the agenda items you'd like to speak on. You have 1 minute per item to speak, up to 3 minutes total, and if you wish, 1 minute for general public comment. Please speak on the items first before providing general comment. We'll tell you when your time's up. When speaking on the agenda items, you must be on topic. Our goal is to get through as many speakers as we can. If you're not speaking on topic, or if we can't tell whether you're speaking on an agenda item, you will get one brief warning from me or the president. If you do not immediately get clearly on topic or against or off topic, the president will cut you off and you'll forfeit the rest of your speaking time, and we'll move on to the next speaker. We'll take at least 25 minutes total of public comment. The only items that are open for public comment are items 3 through 9. Finally, for members of the public calling in to speak, as soon as you hear someone address you, you're live in the council meeting. Please, at that point, when you hear the last 4 digits of your phone number or other identifying information, if you're calling in with the block number, press star 6 to let us know which items you want to speak on. Also, if you're listening on another device, as soon as you hear anybody address you, please turn down the volume on the other devices immediately, because there's a time delay and we'll get feedback. And also, if you are listening on another device, please keep one ear to the phone. Because of the time delay when we address you, we want you to press star 6 right away so that we know that you're still on the line. Thank you very much. We're ready to take public comment.
Caller ending in 3318, press star 6 to unmute yourself. Please state your name and the items you'd like to speak on.
Hi, this is Richie Sergenko from People's City Council. I'd like to speak on all available items and general public comment, please.
You have 3 minutes for your items and 1 minute for general public comment. Go ahead.
Yeah, item 9, the oral presentation by the LA County Health Department. You know, it's January 2021. I think there is a lot understood by everyone what needs to be done. And I see that there's also, items 6 and 7 on report backs on the impact of COVID of women of color in the city's workforce. It's January. I think there's already statistics out there that tell us all of this. I think UCLA Luskin did a great study on what the demographics look like on evictions in LA, and I just don't know why isn't there more discussion about Bonin and Nithia's motion to commandeer the hotels and use the FEMA fund as Joe Biden promised.
So
that
Speaker,
we could use.
could you go back on the agenda items? You're free to talk about that in general public comment if you want, but right now let's stick to items 3 through 9.
Okay, I'll just go on to general public comment. I think there are some members on city council that need to get a little bit thicker skin. You all are the governing body of a city of 4 million people. If you don't understand why people are upset with what's going on in your actions, then you're just not in touch with the reality. Because people are calling in and have been telling you to seize the hotels, stop the sweeps, stop sweeping unhoused people and displacing them, to cancel rent. We've been doing this for 10 months now. If you don't understand why people are upset, Nuri Martinez, and why people are addressing you in a certain manner, have you not been paying attention to what you're the leader of the governing body of a city of 4 million people? You're a landlord and you make $200,000 a year. You don't understand why people are upset at you? And Mark Ridley Thomas to hop in public comment yesterday to defend Nuri Martinez, who's being rightfully criticized. You don't get to squash public dissent.
Thank you very much.
Because
Next
people
speaker.
don't like.
Next speaker.
Caller ending in 7719, press star 6 to unmute yourself. Please state your name and the items you'd like to speak on.
It's Eric Previn from Studio City, and I'll speak on the available items and a general public comment.
You have 3 minutes for your items, Mr. Previn, and 1 minute for general public comment. Please begin.
Okay, Well, first of all, I'll start with the Tech2Go hotspot loan program. Okay, people need access to the internet in this day and age, especially students who are trying to stay in the game with LAUSD and others. You know, Austin Bootner gave a comment yesterday to the County Board of Supervisors, and the Hilda Solis slammed the gavel down at 59 seconds and cut him off. That was the beginning of a terrible series of mishaps in which the public was denied access.
So, Mr.
I
President,
do think that libraries and places that provide access to the internet should not be charging Angelinos. I would love to get a group of council members led by anyone who has the wherewithal and interest to get these blasted tech companies who are profiting hand over fist, growing by leaps and bounds, and the poorest, most impoverished young people in our community can't even get internet without taking some kind of a loan out for this nonsense. So I really do hope that you can put your efforts in that category a little bit. Now, Dr. Ferrer has the hardest job in television, let's be clear, but she's not done a great job. And I would love to ask her, you know, what is going on? The marathon, okay, the first time the marathon came, the mayor and all the friends of the council pushed it through. If you look at the New York Times chronology of this pandemic, you will see the horror of the fact that that moved forward. I wonder now why LA and Los Angeles and all of California has been so mired. I know these are hard decisions, and I know that we can eat outdoors safely, so to constantly torture the businesses about that is not the right area. But what we need is leadership, and we need to get people the vaccine, but we need to do so in an orderly fashion. And here's a simple instruction. The people who are really on the front lines should not be pumped back because people in Beverly Hills who read the LA Times want to get a spare vaccine ahead of everyone, even if they're older. We want to protect our older population, but people who are out there every single day in the grocery stores need to be protected. So let's stay the course, and let's also, you know, I noticed this AstraZeneca thing. What the hell is going on? Why is the County Board of Supervisors jumping in behind a losing, you know, Mr. Ridley Thomas and the lawyers over there did a terrible, terrible job. Miller Barandes and many other law firms simply betrayed the public's trust under his leadership. Now, here we have an item that you've already approved, and I'll go into my general public comment here to talk about it, where the county and the city are cross-indemnifying one another. And this is a real red flag, because we look to these independent jurisdictions for transparency, to turn to the County Board of Supervisors for anything when they have a lawyer named Rodrigo Castro Silva, who is a political hack, who doesn't understand the Brown Act and seems to be repeatedly dropping regular meetings. Mary Wickham started this craziness, so that they meet only half the time. Now, you've heard articulate members of the city say, what the hell, why is the Friday meeting gone? Well, over there, they're taking 1 out of every 2 meetings and turning it into a behind closed doors abnegation, Mr. Ridley Thomas, of their professional responsibility. I only target Mr. Ridley Thomas because he was a thought leader in silencing the public, along with Sheila Kuehl. And they both deserve the highest form of admonishment for that conduct, because now, more than ever, the 11 million in the county and the 4 million in the city need to be heard. There is a serious pandemic, and today, it's 50 degrees outside.
Caller ending in 7059, press *6 to unmute yourself. Please state your name and the items you'd like to speak on.
Zachary Warma on item number 7.
Go ahead, you have 1 minute.
Good morning, council members. Zachary Warma, Public Affairs Lead with the Downtown Women's Center here. On behalf of DWC, I'm calling today in strong support of Agenda Item 7 to examine the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic on working women, particularly mothers and Black, Indigenous, and Latinx women. It's well established that the pandemic has had a disproportionate impact on women, particularly women of color, both here in Los Angeles and across the globe. Whether it's 4 times the number of women dropping out of the U.S. labor force compared to men, the job losses in industries that heavily employ women, the alarming rise in domestic violence calls, or the estimated millions of women-led households at risk of eviction, these stark gender disparities should serve as an urgent call to action. This motion is critical as it lays the groundwork for the city to robustly deploy a gender equity lens when designing policies to uplift our communities, both in the near term and at the eventual conclusion of this pandemic. As the only organization dedicated to ending homelessness amongst women in LA, and as an operator of workforce development and social enterprise programs that assist women in securing employment and jobs training, DWC urges that unhoused women, whose numbers are growing faster than that of men, be fully considered in this report. Thank you.
Next speaker.
Caller ending in 4208, press star 6 to unmute yourself. Please state your name and the items you'd like to speak on.
Hi, it's Rob Kwan. I'd like to speak on items 5, 6, 9, and general public comment.
You have 3 minutes for your items and 1 minute for general public comment. Go ahead.
Thank you. I do think it's absolutely ridiculous that these motions, items 5 and 6, weren't even introduced until January 12th. Vaccines have been rolling out for the better part of like 6 weeks, and it's really just a continuation of our council president dilly-dallying. We saw that when there was an election meltdown in LA County in March, and she brought Dean Logan in the week before the election when he's literally and figuratively putting out fires. It's just, we have Barbara Ferreira in here now, and this just epitomizes taking Monday morning quarterbacking to ridiculous extremes. I don't know what you actually hope to do to change the direction of anything right now. It's really just performative and covering your ass. I really think it's funny. Earlier this year, there were so many council members that told advocates that healthcare is not our jurisdiction. We don't do that. And you look over at Long Beach, and they're crushing it with vaccines because they have their own fucking health department. Instead of actually building things, what you've done is dump money over to LAPD overtime in the years, their drop program, continuation of expanding their budget, and now we're not prepared. All of this is just cumbersomely obstructed by our council president taking a month-long recess in the midst of the height of our pandemic. It was really sad last year to see the indifference of our federal government with COVID, indifference to human life. It was also really sad to see our state and local governments prematurely reopen. But at least you had the excuse of not having the federal government in line with you. At least you had the excuse of, oh, our budget's shit. Well, this week was a revelation of just about how shameless you all are, whether it's caving to Gavin Newsom's political vulnerabilities or just catering to the business industry. One last note on COVID. I hope you do consider commandeering the St. Vincent Hospital for Project Room Key. This should be a use it or lose it thing. For general public comment, I have to note that both at this council meeting and yesterday's, you violated your own council rules. I ask any of the cowards around the horseshoe to speak up. You're the ones that can invoke and check the council president when she flagrantly violates the rules. You're supposed to give a minimum of 30 minutes public comment at these meetings, and you're given 25. To Mark Lee Thomas, respectfully, that's not your time. That's not your time to speak, and don't act like Mr. Herman and Spindler never said the same shit at County Board of Supervisors. This is transparent. You're kissing ass and sucking up to Council President Martinez because you know she hates them. It's the same reason you breathlessly say, Madam President, like you're in the fucking White House with her. Get your shit together. Why don't you go investigate John Lee? Have a nice day. I yield my time. Fuck you.
Caller ending in 1148, press star 6 to unmute yourself. Please state your name and the items you'd like to speak on.
My name is Len Moses, and I would like to speak on all available items and general public comment, please.
Mr. Moses, you have 3 minutes for all your items and 1 minute for your general public comment. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, City of Los Angeles. Apologize to Ms. Autry Martinez. 25, 30 minutes of public comment in a city of 4 million people. This is the most disgraceful example of democracy I've ever seen in my life. What an embarrassment.
So, Mr. Moses, could we move on to the items?
My items, yes, sir. To my items, number 5, strategy to identify city facilities that could be used for distribution of COVID-19 vaccine. I suggest 4 sites. 8475 South Vermont, which we spent $500,000 giving. Look at this guy. Look at him. Dawson. Sleazy things going on. For a luxury office, we can use the Fame building, which he wants to vacate to, which he spent $488,000 on Adams Boulevard, that this sleazy council gave him in the last 20 months. We can use 5462 Crenshaw Boulevard, which Get It Wet John Lee co-motioned $541,000 about 2 months ago for another luxury office. We could use his City Hall office. These are 4 offices. Not to mention the $308,000 this sleazy council gave him to take over the unemployment office in the highest unemployment rate of the city, CD8, Dawson. We could use these 4 buildings. That's over $2 million. And you talk about a budget shortfall? Are you kidding me? Krikorian, where's your budget? We could use these 4 buildings. That means after Vermont and 5462 Crenshaw are done, he will have 4 offices open. Oh, I take that back. It's the City Hall office that nobody's sitting in. $2 million, how many people can that feed? Well, the people are starving and dying in the streets, and he has a Tesla, a city-owned Tesla in his driveway.
Mr. Moses, I think
All
we
right.
veered off.
Number 6 and number 7. Both of these are report-back strategies. These are just fluff items to make yourself look good. You can sit there and talk about them. Barbara Ferrer is going to talk about COVID. And how about some mask wearing? It wasn't until January 13th where a motion came up, Martinez started wearing a mask. What kind of leadership is that?
Mr. Moses, you want to move on to your general public comment, sir?
Yes, I do. Thank you. I'm going to read something here. The king of Uncle Tom's, the Tom of Toms, has arrived. The 1944 Federal Highway Act offered to pay 50% of construction highway costs. In 1956, the government upped the ante to 90% of the cost. Many white politicians used this opportunity to destroy black neighborhoods and make white suburbs more accessible. Mark Ridley Thomas, ahead of any other individual, took that train above ground on Crenshaw Boulevard and destroyed over 300 black mom and pop businesses. This guy wants to be mayor. This is the Tom of Toms. Talk about a disaster. You people do not want to solve homelessness. We cannot build our way out of homelessness. We cannot build enough units. This city council, in its vote trading swaps.
Caller ending in 9917, press *6 to unmute yourself. Please state your name and the items you'd like to speak on.
Hi, CL, they, them pronouns, items 5, 6, 9, and general public comment, please.
You have 3 minutes for your items and 1 minute for general public comment. Go ahead.
Thank you. 5 and 6 are well-intentioned but months late. You knew a vaccine was coming in general, but you never developed a detailed modern plan on tactics and best practices for distribution where it's needed most. Mary Martinez, you watched COVID numbers be the worst in the city in your district and let the working class Latino community that you exploit for your political career die rather than working on Fridays to develop a plan with your colleagues. We work 6 days a week, Mary. What about you? Now, instead of being a vaccine leader across the country by having a plan ready to go at the moment you knew vaccines were coming, you're here with weak motions that are a failure of leadership. Mary, don't act like you did something. You've done nothing. The state has swept aside any sense of equity or science, and you're letting that happen here in LA by being way too late and falling unbelievably short of any standard of human decency and regard for your fellow humans. Both of these motions are a failure sitting here on January 27th. Where were these on September 27th, Nuri? What have you been doing with your Fridays during the state of emergency that's more important than coming up with a plan for the vaccine? This is a failure and a disgrace. What is Barbara Ferrer going to tell you now when she should have had this opportunity while you were on winter break as we watched the virus break our ICU capacity? Why are you wasting her time if you don't care? Council, I want to ask what it would cost you to do the right thing, but that would be to ask how much of yourself you've already sold off, and maybe I don't want to know that answer. General public comment. Mark Ridley Thomas, you owe me an apology for attempting to interrupt my public comment yesterday in violation of the Brown Act while I was saying my last fuck you to Nuri and hanging up. As a Latinx person, I have the right to call out my own exploitation by the council president, and as a human, I have the right to say the word fuck in all its wonderful forms. It's in the Brown Act. It's a shame that you returned to LA City Council without a sense of urgency. You were going toe-to-toe with the sheriff only a few months ago. Now it seems you're here to just lose the next mayoral election by sitting on this do-nothing council without pulling it out of its downward spiral, and you're content to engage with petty arguments with working-class constituents. Please apologize or retire and don't interrupt me ever again. And hey, snitcho failure in CD13, eat shit. I yield my time. Fuck you.
Next speaker.
Caller ending in 7006, press star 6 to unmute yourself. Please state your name and the items you'd like to speak on.
Mommy! It's me, Mommy! All items and general public comment if I could.
Yep. Mr. Herman, you've got 3 minutes for your items and 1 minute for general public comment.
Thank you. I'm back again. Yes. So the lovely Barbara Ferrer, the hottie, is going to tell us how many more are going to die. It won't be that many. We have to reopen. As Mark Ridley Monkey once said, quote, reopen at all costs, even if a few more die. I agree. Or something like that. Now we're going to get our favorite thing, vaccine. Yay! You have to take 2 of them. One in your arm and one like Eric Garcetti up the asshole. And then you won't get COVID, just like AIDS. Ask the city attorney about that. Now we get to the budgetary matters. Spending money on bullshit, for bullshit, and more bullshit. And that's what we look forward to. Now if I can get to my general comments so other people can get my extra 51.99 seconds. Am I a minute now? Okay. I take your silence as an admission, to quote the FBI on Monday. Mitchell Englander, 14 months. You know, it was worth it. Yes, he only got 14 months to spend 11 years stealing, lying, cheating, and calling women city employees all those pretty names like whore. Yes, my hero. Staffer B, you're John Lee. And then finally, Kevin De Leon couldn't say the Constitutional Statute of Liberty pledge, not because he's retarded, it's only because he's illiterate in English. He's fluent in Mandarin and Spanish, just like his mentor,
Thank you, Mr. Spindler.
Caller ending in 4024, press star 6 to unmute yourself. Please state your name and the items you'd like to speak on.
Herman, baby. Good morning. Good job, Mr. Spindler. However, I'm going to speak on all items in general public comment. Are you there?
Mr. Herman, you have 3 minutes for your items, followed by 1 minute for general.
Well, thank you, sir. God hates homosexuals. Now, ever since COVID-19 and 21 came into our lives, we heard it over and over like a broken record. Barbara Fart, the dumb cunt from the Board of Supervisors, continues to mislead us and misdirect us in what position we hold as business owners to reopen, reclose, reopen, reclose. However, the state and federal government needs to audit how the fuck are you guys spending all this money? Or is it just waste and abuse like usual? 11 years like Mitchell Englander. Now to my general public comment, you fucking cunts. Regarding COVID, the history of chongos, thugs in our political arena that can't handle what we say. Brandenburg versus Ohio, Hess versus Indiana, and Lohman, who talks about the criminal corruption and abuse by intimidation like you chongos, who tell us that we're off topic, while 42 U.S.C. 1983, love you, mommy, but fuck you. Thank all those who participate for bringing out the attention. Fuck you, because that's what they are. Cunt-sucking bitches and hoes who want to fuck us for 11 years like Mitchell Englander. Now you're on Lone Pop, asshole. No Vaseline, no gasoline, no Vaseline. You know what I mean, fool? And what about you, Chongo, sitting back there rubbing your head? I pledge allegiance.
Your time is up.
Thank you, Mr.
Next speaker.
Caller ending in 5245, press star 6 to unmute yourself. Caller ending in 5245, press star 6 to unmute yourself. Caller ending in 0899, press star 6 to unmute yourself. Please state your name and the items you'd like to speak on.
Yes, my name is Stacey Dawson Stearns. I'd like to speak on 569 and general public comment.
You have 3 minutes for your comment.
Thank you. First of all, to this chamber, it's really horrible to have to go after those two guys because I think you all have a hard time separating the people who are civically engaged and rightfully angry and people who are just obscene and really horrible. So please listen to me. I might be angry with you, but I'm not a horrible person. Okay, so this is absurd, y'all. We have the data. This city, this county is in death spiral, and this body is in perpetual slow motion, thanks to a president who's not only obscenely irresponsible, but too fragile to face critique. You cancel Friday meetings and the ad hoc police reform committee. You have an ad hoc committee on COVID-19 recovery and neighborhood investment, but where is the pandemic response committee? I second Mr. Kwan's message to the horseshoe. Screw your courage to the sticking place, my dears, and step up to your president. General public comment. Okay, I'm directing this to our new council members. I have a great idea. How about you all make a motion for a 15-day report back on this council's analysis and consideration of the people's budget? Since the historic meeting in June when the people's budget was presented before the council, we have watched Mayor Garcetti and many of our CMs appropriate the language of reimagining to slap on to many a sidestepping pseudo action related to budgeting, public safety, and a wide array of motions funneling money back into the LAPD. It seems only fair to the 25,000 Angelinas who participated, the coalition of community leaders who assembled this comprehensive study and presented it to this body last June, and to the new members in council, that this budget be revisited and engaged with in a meaningful manner. Please stop stifling public comment. And you guys give more, there's more time for adjourning motions than public comment. We don't need to listen to Joey Buckets perform a head boy style soliloquy as he tries to construct his mayoral run campaign in real time and on our dime during these meetings. It's disgusting, it's despicable. Please put a time limit on it. Shout out to Mike Bonin, who has dared to publicly denounce and expose the troubling role that the Los Angeles Police Protective League has in our city.
Okay, that concludes public comment. Let's go ahead and vote on the following items, Madam Clerk. Let's go ahead and vote on items 3 through 8. Go ahead and call the roll.
Blumenfield.
Blumenfield, aye.
Bonin.
Bonin, aye.
Buscaino.
Aye.
Cedillo,
Aye.
De Leon,
Aye.
Harris Dawson,
Yes.
Koretz,
Aye.
Krikorian,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Martinez,
Aye.
O'Farrell,
Aye.
Price,
Aye.
Rahman,
Aye.
Ridley Thomas,
Aye.
Rodriguez.
Aye.
15 ayes. These items are adopted.
Okay, members, I'm going to take a short recess. We're trying to get Dr. Ferrer to join our meeting. I know we were scheduled for 11 o'clock, but I'm going to see if we can't get a hold of her so she can join us a lot earlier. Just give me about 5 minutes and we'll be back. Thank you.
Are you?
Blumenfield.
Blumenfield present.
Bonin.
Bonin present.
Buscaino.
Here.
Cedillo.
Cedillo present.
De Leon.
Here.
Harris Dawson.
Here.
Koretz.
Present.
Krikorian.
Here.
Lee. Lee. Martinez.
Present.
O'Farrell.
Present.
Price.
Here.
Rahman.
Here.
Ridley Thomas.
Here.
Rodriguez.
Here.
14 members present and a quorum, Madam President.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I just want to give Dr. Ferrer an opportunity to join us. I think she's connected. I just want to see her. Dr. Ferrer, can you hear us?
She's on her way.
All right, thank you. We'll go ahead and wait. But colleagues, while we wait for Dr. Ferrer, we're going to go ahead and move on to item number 9 on today's agenda. And with us, we have an oral presentation this morning from LA County Department of Public Health. We also are joined by the Hospital Association of Southern California and our Los Angeles Fire Department. And they're going to give us a status of the COVID-19 pandemic in our city and our county as it relates to the current surge cases. And that's affecting our hospital capacity and the distribution of vaccines. So with us, we have Jaime Garcia with LA County Regional Vice President with the Hospital Association of Southern California. Mr. Garcia, can you hear us? There you are. Hi, Jaime.
Good morning. Thank you.
Good morning. We also are joined by Chief Terrazas with our Fire Department. Chief, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Good morning, everyone.
Thank you. Good morning. And we're now joined by Dr. Ferrer. Good morning, Dr. Ferrer. Can you hear us?
Yeah, good morning.
Director of LA County Department of Public Health. So thank you very much for being here to join us this morning. I know there's going to be a lot of questions this morning, and you all have limited time to be with us, so I'm going to ask the members to please be brief. as much as you can so we can get through all the questions. And Mr. Koretz, I'm going to go ahead and hand this over to you since your office was instrumental in coordinating today's presentation. Go ahead, Mr. Koretz.
Well, thank you, Madam President, and thank you, Dr. Ferrer, for being here today and for your good work, especially over the year of the COVID crisis. LA County is very fortunate to have you and your team leading this effort, and I know it's difficult, so thank you. First question I have, and I'll combine a few, are all about the vaccine. I know constituents and others are calling my office with questions and complaints
Just lift it and then
about the vaccine rollout. And I'm sure other council offices are experiencing the same. And I know that much of this has to do with available vaccine supply, but what is the state and the county doing to reduce confusion and make sure Angelenos have the accurate information they need? I know some people found it very easy to get vaccinated and others very difficult. We hear about the short supply overall, but also that some locations wind up with excess supplies because not everyone takes their shot, and it's unclear whether there's consistency with what they do with the excess. So, and lastly, is there more that we can do to publicize the phone numbers of how to get the vaccine, since the over 65 age group is the most likely to be less computer savvy?
Oh, thank you so much, Council Member Peretz, and also Council President Martinez, and all of the city councilors. I do want to just thank, before I answer the question, I just want to thank everyone. I want to thank the mayor. I want to thank our partners at LA City Fire for all of the work that we've been doing, together over this past year. There's no one group that's really responsible for all of the response efforts. This has been a partnership, and I want to really make sure I start by thanking every single one of you for your leadership and your support. It's been a long year. I know we're at a hopeful point with the vaccines, with having 2 vaccines that are safe, they're effective, and they're starting to become more available. I do want to say from the start that you are right to note that the biggest problem we have right now here in our county, and frankly across the country, is related to scarce supply. We in fact have over 300 registered providers throughout the county that are able to, at this point, administer vaccine. And that makes it a lot easier for everyone who's eligible for vaccine to get vaccinated without having to drive long distances and face lines at some of the sites that are open. But we just have not received enough vaccine. Last week, for this entire week, the entire county received 144,000 doses. And of those 144,000 doses, 86,000 of them had to go for second doses. So I want to just be honest about the constraints. Everybody who gets a first dose is guaranteed their second dose. If it's a first dose of Pfizer, you're going to get your second dose somewhere around 21 days later. It doesn't have to be exactly 21 days, but it's around there. If you get a Moderna vaccine, you're going to get your second dose somewhere around 28 days later. And so the first confusion is people are desperate to make sure they can get those appointments for second doses. Now, the group that's actually coming up for second doses right now are healthcare workers. They're the only ones we were vaccinating 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago. And we're working to make sure that they can go back to the site where they received their first dose, or in the few situations where that site is no longer open, they're getting clear instructions of what sites will be open where they'll get appointments for their second dose. So I want to just reassure everyone, even if you didn't get an appointment for your second dose, everybody who was administering those first doses will be reaching out to you to get you that second dose. And we will be setting up with those partners a way for you to contact those partners if for some reason you don't get notified about your appointment. For everyone who's 65 and older, or who in this last week was receiving their doses either at one of the county large vaccination sites or one of the city's vaccination sites, you too are guaranteed a second dose, and you too will be notified in this upcoming week of when that appointment is and where you should go to get your second dose. I know people are frantic because, as you noted, the appointment system has not worked all that well. So the first group that I want to reassure is everybody who needs that second dose. We will make sure you get your second dose. It doesn't have to be the exact date, 21 days or 28 days, but it will be close to then, and you will be able, for the most part, to go back to the site where you got your first dose to get that second dose. And we, whatever doses come into the county, the first group that is allocated doses are those that are going to need their second doses. So I just want to reassure everyone about the second dose issue, because I know how pressing that issue has been, and I know how frantic people are to figure out how they're going to get an appointment. So you will be contacted by the site where you got your first dose with information about how to schedule that appointment for your second dose. And that should happen this week for everyone who was already vaccinated a couple of weeks ago. So no one should be frantic about getting that second dose. In terms of sort of what are the plans moving forward, I want to just say a couple of things. We've built a vast network in this county where people can get vaccinated. And as we get these doses, we try to allocate particularly to those communities who have been the hardest hit, the providers that are in those communities so that they're able to do those vaccinations. But we do also have these large sites that are spread across the county and the city, Dodger Stadium being one of them. They have more capacity than they're going to have doses to be able to administer. But these are also places where people are trying to book appointments. One of the issues is, as soon as we open to 65, people who are 65 and older being able to get appointments, was that's 1.4 million people across the county. And we only had about 60,000 appointments. So everything got overloaded. We're working to fix both the call center, because just like you noted, a lot of people who are older cannot navigate on the web. They might not have internet access. They may not even have a computer, and they certainly may struggle to make appointments that way. So we're trying to increase capacity at the call center so that if we don't get to your call and you leave a callback number, we're at least returning the calls within 24 to 48 hours to help people book through that. But the real limiting factor is just that we don't have appointments, not that we're not trying to accommodate folks. As soon as appointments become available, they're filling up at all of the sites across the county right now. I do also want to note that we're also working with our partners for people who are older and aren't mobile. We're trying to come up with a strategy. So please don't feel like we're leaving you out because you can't drive to a site. We recognize that, and we're working on setting up some mobile teams that will have capacity. This will be a couple of weeks out, but to be able to go to some of the senior centers and some of the senior housing developments where people have limited mobility, so that we can offer a way for folks with less mobility to be able to get vaccinated. The state yesterday acknowledged that they are moving towards a system of allocation and distribution that will be more centralized at the state with one registration system for everyone in the state. Right now here, even in LA County, there are 9 different patient registration systems that are running. They all have to eventually feed into the state, but we have 9 separate registration systems. The state would like to do away with that over the upcoming weeks. We'll have only one patient registration system. That would be my turn, that we've been piloting here in LA County. But they also are going to create a provider network. And we're going to transition, all of us, every county is going to transition to using that provider network as sort of the way to organize the distribution of vaccines all across the state. We don't have a lot of details on that, but I do want to sort of give everyone the heads up that the state is looking to creating a streamlined patient registration system and a well-defined network of providers who will be administering vaccine. And I would imagine we'll hear more about that in the weeks to come. In the meantime, we're working closely with everyone in the city. I want to, answer the questions about the schools at the same time. LAUSD has been a wonderful partner on a whole host of issues, including offering to help us set up some vaccination sites, particularly in some of the hardest hit communities at their schools. We're working with them to make sure that they're registered In many sites, they'll be using partners with federally qualified health centers to make sure that that goes smoothly, but we're definitely open to that as well. So thanks for that question, Council Member.
Thank you. I've got other members on the queue, so if I can go ahead and go, I'm going to go down the list. Mr. Bonin?
Thank you, Madam President. Just a couple questions. First of all, thank you for Dr. Ferrer and the Chief and Mr. Garcia for being here with us today. From the beginning of this, I have tried to be very, very supportive of public health agencies and the governor. I thought it was very, very important that we follow the science and the metrics. And my two questions come from a place of being very confused and frustrated by a lot of the announcements that have come this week, one by a state level one and then one at the county level. First, the state level, perhaps you could shed some light on it. From what I can understand, the governor's announcement about vaccine distribution is going to be prioritized by age and by age groups. And I have heard, and I'm sure we have all seen, the complaints and the pleas and the grumblings and the anger from people with disabilities, people with health conditions who are wondering how it is that someone who's under 65, who has cancer or emphysema or an immune deficiency isn't getting higher priority. Two-part question. Has the governor's office explained at all why the heck that is the approach they're taking? And is the county bound to follow those protocols?
Yeah, those are excellent questions. I just, a couple, Council Member, and I want to just thank you for all your support. You've been wonderful throughout the year. I do want to note just a couple of things. One is so that there's not a lot of worry out there. The governor did announce that they were thinking of moving to an age-based prioritization system, but we will complete phase 1B tier 1. That includes both people who are 65 and older, but 3 important essential worker sectors: education and childcare, daycare, agriculture and food, and public safety. So I want essential workers who are already have heard that they in fact are still going to come up in this next round when we have more vaccines, that did not get scrapped. So we will complete tier 1 of 1B, and then the governor has said we will move to this age distribution. I really don't have any more details about what that's going to look like, and heard the same announcement you did. I know that he does work with a task force and a couple of working groups to sort of tease through the decisions that get made. And we're certainly sitting at the table and raising some similar issues about protecting people with underlying health conditions. The CDC did also qualify that. I know people think, well, that's everybody. You know, we all can say we have an underlying health condition because many people do. But the CDC actually created a list of 9 conditions that have been shown to actually increase risk. So it's not just that you have a health condition, it's that the health condition you have puts you at increased risk of serious illness from COVID-19. And I do agree with you that it's important to figure out how we're going to prioritize people who have these underlying health conditions, because the data is pretty clear. Around 90% of people who unfortunately are dying from COVID in our county are people with underlying health conditions. 72% are people who are older, 65 and older, but almost 90%, it's hovering between like 86%, 92%, are in fact people with underlying health conditions. So I don't know, I think the governor is just moving away from, having different groups of workers qualify, but I don't know that anybody has really made a firm decision yet, Council Member, on scrapping the need to figure out how to, again, use our opportunities to vaccinate to first and foremost protect people who are at higher risk of dying.
Well, yeah, it's frustrating not to have it based on risk and need. And I'm afraid while the governor may reconsider on the health conditions, he's kind of made it irreversible. I went to their website the other day and I registered, and I don't have a condition, one of the 9 conditions that would qualify, but I filled it out. It asked me my age. It asked me my occupation. but it did not even ask. So all these people who are now registering won't have an opportunity to be marked down there. It's very disturbing. I was equally confused by what the rationale was behind his decision to do the reopenings that he was doing. You look at the stats statewide, but certainly the case locally. Our hospital are still overstressed. The caseload and all the indicators, everything from the case index to the equity index, are all at numbers that are not better than, not significantly better, certainly, of when we did the closures. So I was confused by the governor's announcement, and then I know the county is following suit. What is the science or the logic behind the reopenings, given the metrics that don't seem to me that they indicate that?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Council Member. It's probably important to note that when the governor allowed all of the counties across the state to exit the regional safer at home orders in those 3 regions that were still under the stay at home orders from the state, he made sure that each county understood that they were still bound by the restrictions on the tiered system. So it wasn't like you exit and everything opens. You exit and you go back to, for us, purple, and really, frankly, for most of the state, you go back to that purple tier. And within that purple tier, y'all remember, we have a lot of restrictions that are still in place. If you look back at what we did as the county on November 25th, when we issued our health officer order, watching the acceleration of cases take off here, it really was adhering a lot to the restrictions that we would be under in the purple, as while we were in the purple tier, but making modifications within the sectors that would be open. So we reduced all of the occupancy levels at all the sectors that are open, both indoors and outdoors, because one of the clear pieces of evidence we have is that this virus is much more likely to be transmitted indoors, but indoors when people aren't wearing a face covering, and indoors when people aren't keeping their distance, are also important considerations. So we've eliminated any possibility for people to be indoors without face coverings when they're not with their household and in any crowded situations. As a matter of fact, the occupancy rates indoors are about 25%, and that's what we've gone back to. The only real change for us from that November 25th health officer order is that on Friday, we will be allowing restaurants to reopen for outdoor dining. As everybody remembers, we have a lot of concern because that's a place where people will be taking off their face coverings. They're often there with people that may not be from their households in the past, and they're workers that need extra protection. So we will be meeting with both restaurant owners and operators and the representative unions today to talk through some additional safety requirements that we are going to ask restaurants to use when they reopen outdoors. So I guess what I want to say is we are on the decline. I feel comfortable saying at this moment we're out of the surge, but you're absolutely right. Our numbers in no area have dropped to where they were prior to the surge. And there is, in fact, the worry, as there has been in the past, that when you do any reopenings, you create more opportunities for people to intermingle. And many people read this as like we don't have a big problem anymore. And that will not work for us.
And you've got people who are now going back to work and are afraid to not go back to work because they might lose their unemployment, and then that hurts their families. And they have not yet been vaccinated. And I think that's sort of an intersection of where a lot of the public concern is.
Okay, Mr. Bonin, I also have to move on to another member. So, thank you. Mr. De Leon?
Thank you much, Madam President. Good morning, Dr. Ferrer, and thank you for coming to take a few questions from the council members. As you know very well, my East Side district has been devastated by COVID-19. Boyle Heights alone has one of the highest infection rates in the country. In fact, as of yesterday, Boyle Heights has had roughly about 16,000 COVID cases, so clearly the highest in the city, if not one of the highest. This week we heard changes to vaccine distribution tiers coming down from the state, and also have heard of adjustments being made by the county. Can you please clarify the chain of command between the state and county in determining who is eligible for vaccination and how those vaccines will be distributed? In short, who's in charge exactly is what I'd like to know in that chain of command between the county and the state. And then I have one more question after that.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Council Member De Leon. I think the chain of command really is that the state receives allocations from the federal government and then allocates those out to the county. So in many ways, the state actually has a lot of control if you think about this in terms of a chain of command. The one exception to that is the federal government set up the federal partnership with CVS and Walgreens for administering doses to long-term care facilities. And that's really taken off of the top of the allocations. But everything else really does funnel through the state, and the state controls the distribution. I will say that what the state has done is every week, the state has said to the county, these are the number of doses you have, with the exception of what's going to the federal partnership and what goes to these what are called county entities, the Kaisers, UCLA, Providence, that actually serve more than one county. They get their own doses directly from the state, and we don't actually see those. But we'll get, for example, last week we got 144,000 doses. We will work with all of the providers that are registered in LA County. We will guarantee those second doses, and then we will allocate the rest of the first doses out, paying a lot of attention to trying to get, for example, federally qualified health centers both on board to be registered, but also to make sure they get enough doses in the hardest hit communities. That will change with the new direction that was issued by the governor, where they will actually make many more of the decisions about allocations throughout the state to providers. The county health department will receive its own allocation as a provider, but we will no longer be sort of the distributor of vaccine for this county. So I think in many ways, a lot of the responsibility will rest with the state. Has rested with the state in many ways, but will continue. It will be a more centralized model according to what the governor announced yesterday.
So these are, I'm assuming, recent changes. Does the county have the ability, say, for example, if 65 plus are eligible, and I know Assembly Member Miguel Santiago and Congressman Jimmy Gomez asked me to forward this question as well. If 65 plus are eligible and there's a scarcity of vaccinations, as opposed to going 65 plus wide, can we be more strategic and surgical in our application of the vaccinations, given the quantities of the scarcity? Because if you're 65 plus, and let's say you're wealthy and you live in a 5,000 square foot home in the Tony section of Los Angeles, you have the ability to Zoom and you have the ability to sort of hibernate in a home, a large home. Whereas if you are a Latina single mother who has to work at McDonald's and is exposed every day, and also to doesn't have the ability to pay their rent, is that a prudent application of the vaccination rollout? So that's one thing I want to get your comments on. And secondly, too, obviously, I know we have Forum at Inglewood, we have Downey, we have Dodger Stadium. A lot of kudos to our Mayor Eric Garcetti and Fire Chief, Ralph Terrazas for the whole logistical rollout. Thank you very much for your fantastic work. But in hot spots, say for example, we have nothing in Boyle Heights. We have nothing in MacArthur Park or Watts or South LA or parts of San Fernando Valley like Pacoima, where these are real hot spots and there's nothing there. So you have the challenges of folks who don't have access to Wi-Fi or internet can't maneuver, navigate, and they're the ones who need it the most, then you have a logistical issue with regards to folks getting able to get to, these big centers, which primarily by far and large are outside of the city parameters of Los Angeles. So I just want to get your thoughts with regards to the 65 plus in comparison to the Latina mother who's being exposed every day and who's going to fall victim to an eviction. How are we distributing the vaccinations in a very smart, strategic way?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I do think, that we do have this opportunity to think strategically about how to reach those that, as you noted, are more in need of getting vaccinated. Obviously, if you're teleworking, even if you're 65 and older and you don't have to leave your house hardly at all, you have much less risk than, as you noted, all of our essential workers that are 65 and older and are working. And it would be good for us to work together to figure out the strategies for making sure that there's easy access to vaccine for those folks. And I do think we would be allowed to do that. The strategy to date on that is really not to depend on these large vaccination sites. We have 190 sites open throughout the county where people can go and get vaccinated. And we are working on partnerships with both labor and business around this issue around essential workers, particularly in the, those three categories of workers that will become eligible shortly because they're in 1B Tier 1. To do exactly what you say is to think about a prioritization there where we're really looking at those essential workers that are 65 and older in those three sectors as being able to get vaccinated more easily than other people who aren't, as you noted, necessarily having the same risk of exposures. I think our strategy to date has been to figure out how to partner with those healthcare providers that actually already serve that population. Because it's very comfortable for people to go to a federally qualified health center or a clinic in their neighborhood, or even a pharmacy in their neighborhood, whether that's a chain pharmacy or an independent pharmacy, to go and get vaccinated than it is to ask people to drive long distances. And many people can't do that. They don't have cars, particularly people 65 and older. So I think our strategy to date has been to really build capacity in the neighborhoods that are hardest hit with federally qualified health centers, clinics, and providers to try to make sure that we're making it easier for people to get vaccinated there. But I do appreciate your comments, and I do think, particularly as we're going to need to come up with strategies for these, essential worker sectors. If you do the math on those sectors and you add in then people who are 65 and older, like for LA County, that's going to be like over 2.5 million people that are going to be eligible to get vaccinated in the next short while. And we haven't even received 1 million doses here in LA County yet. And, when you do the math, everybody needs 2 vaccines. We have this staggering shortage, but I do agree with you that it is best when you have a shortage and when you have scarcity to really look hard at how do you make sure this vaccine is getting into the arms of those who have high risk. Anxious always to hear your thoughts on ways we can be better about targeting and making sure that this vaccine is more easily available to those that have a lot of risk.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ferrer, for your answers. And I know it's not been easy. You've been in a very difficult situation. I will reach out to you, and my staff will reach out to your staff to see how we can figure out strategically those hot spots. And I know it's challenging. Just a comment that said, from the federal government to the state government to the county and then to the city. And you have all these layers. And I know there's been an attempt by the executive branch of the city of LA to go directly from President Joe Biden for distribution directly to the city, given the massivity of a city of over 4 million, individuals, which is in itself, being the second largest city, is a logistical challenge unlike anything we've ever seen before, especially when 50% of the district or the city is of people of color in a very low, economic means. So the internet and how you navigate walk up or drive up, and which logistical places is tough, because in LA County, over 500,000, Latinos have been infected. They have the highest infection rate, the highest mortality rate. They're 4 times higher than the closest group. So I will give you a holler and see where we can figure out the next batch that's coming down, so we can target it more surgically to the highest need communities. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Price?
Thank you, Madam President. Doctor, again, thank you for your leadership on this. We also appreciate efforts from our fire department chief. Thank you. And Jaime, good to see you, sir. And we just appreciate the collaborative efforts. I just want to underscore the comments made by Mr. De Leon, about the concerns we have about the hot spots, South LA, East LA, parts of the Valley, where we have citizens at risk who have no choices, who have to go out to work, and they're not getting services. And so it's just disheartening. Almost every story you read, talks about the shortage in South LA, how folks are not getting the vaccination, and so we got to figure out some ways to make the vaccination available and available easy. You briefly mentioned the notion of mobile delivery. Has that been fleshed out? How do we really could take advantage of that, getting to the senior facilities, for example, and other parts where individuals may not have a chance to come? Where are we on those mobile services, and how can that be a more active part of our overall outreach plan?
Dr. Ferrer, if I may, I see this as a recurring question. The Los Angeles City Fire Department, in partnership with CORE, we do have 7 mobile teams, and we have been mobilizing them throughout the city for the past several months. But right now it's limited to testing. We do place them in hotspots. We have, as of a few days ago, we were at the Sears in Boyle Heights, MacArthur Park, LA Apparel in South LA. Sometimes we set up at busy intersections, and it's all predicated on hotspots within the community. Now, with the arrival of additional vaccines, I think that's an easy transition to build upon that model, our mobile testing model, to provide vaccines to those hard-hit communities. I would ask that when we get to that point, we would work together to publicize their location so that they know they're there. That's what we're doing, in addition to many other things, but that goes to your question, sir.
And I think, and I want to thank the chief, because you also are working with us on mobile teams at the skilled nursing facilities. So the place where we've actually been doing vaccinations with mobile teams have been at some of the skilled nursing facilities that weren't able to vaccinate the residents and the staff themselves. And we actually have a great partnership with the city on this as well, where we've created mobile teams. We're working with Curative and some of the sites. So we do have experience, and we know that it can be effective. Once we're done, we're almost done with doing second doses at all the skilled nursing facilities. And then our teams at the county level will be transitioning to doing mobile, having these mobile units go to senior housing developments and senior centers as we're able.
And public housing. And public housing, I think, also would be an important target for that. Again, I appreciate the effort. All I'm saying is that we got to ramp it up. It should not be the best kept secret in town that these mobile, that the mobile facilities are available. We really need to roll them out, collaborate more with community-based organizations. I appreciate the community health organization's role in this, but we just got to do more, and we just got to do it faster.
We do have 6 new sites that will open up, council member, in South LA next week. Some are pharmacies, and some are a couple of community federally qualified health centers that are opening up more sites. And I think one is a partnership with a school in that district.
Okay, great. We'd like to know where they are specifically, if we get that information from you as soon as possible. And testing is another question, and we know that there had been extensive testing all around the city. Dodger Stadium was a major site, test site. Now that that has been converted to a vaccination site, are we coming up short on the testing side, or are we still able to do the kind of outreach necessary to make sure folks are getting tested who want to be tested?
What I can say from the county's perspective, that we've increased the capacity at all of the county sites to try to make up for the capacity that was lost when Dodger Stadium flipped over to be a vaccination site. But I also recognize that, you know, your fire chief has been instrumental in really helping with setting up testing sites in the city of LA, and want to give him a chance to respond as well. But we are back to, I think, across the entire county, including the city, having recovered most of the capacity that we lost. I also want to note that there's a new program where people can order a test kit. If they can't get out of their house to go get tested, there's an easy way through the Department of Health Services to order your test kit and have that test kit sent to your home. And then in the privacy of your home, you take your sample, you swab it, and you put it in the mail.
Okay.
I could add on to that, sir. We are testing 130,000 people within the city. We've noticed that we have
that's on a weekly basis, Chief, or what's that 130,000?
That's weekly. We have noticed there's been available appointments, and the availability of appointments has increased, which the demand has decreased by about 20% because there's a greater demand for the vaccination. So we're watching those numbers throughout the sites. And when we get more vaccines, we want to transition to do more vaccinating.
And finally, you know, the real tragedy that has occurred are the deaths that have been caused by COVID, and of course the pain that is extended to family and friends because of these deaths. You know, we were able to determine earlier this week that almost 600 individuals lost their lives to COVID in CD9 since the first of the year, since January. I just kind of want to get a better feel from you on how these numbers are generated. Is there one source? Is there a weekly tally that's done? How are we tracking these deaths? And
Sure.
And what can we do?
Yeah, thanks, council member. Yes, we do track every death from COVID-19. All deaths from COVID-19 are reported to us. We report every day on deaths.
It comes through the county?
Comes through the county. You know, obviously we work closely with the coroner as well on deaths that are, you know, sort of an undetermined nature to determine whether it was a COVID-19, a death that was caused by COVID-19 or something else. But everybody reports to us, and yes, we do report that out daily. We also report deaths out and death rates out by community, so people can go on our website on a regular.
By community, by zip code, or what's?
We do it by community. It's not by, you know, so you can look up for Boyle Heights. You could look it up. You could look it up for, you know, Inglewood. You could, you know, you just would go in by the name of.
Yeah, I think that's what we've been doing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's mapped that way, and it's updated on a regular basis. So that people have a better sense of where the deaths are occurring. And then every 2 weeks, I do report out, like I will this afternoon at the press briefing. I take a look at what's happening with our case rates, death rates, and hospitalization rates by race and ethnicity, and by level of poverty in communities, and try to again do, you know, look more globally at sort of what do the trends tell us about these gaps that you've mentioned and that we're also concerned about. So we track that very closely, and then again try to target resources based on what we're seeing.
All right, thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you. Mr. Cedillo? Mr. Cedillo?
Thank you. So, difficult not to be redundant, so let me start with a big thank you, Dr. Ferrer, for your leadership and tenacity and your hard work. No good deed goes unpunished in our business. We run for office, and we know that when we do that. But you are an appointed leader. You come up through the ranks, and you don't seek the public notoriety that all of us accept as part of our job. Now, you'll never be able to go out and have dinner without being interrupted, or go out with your family and friends. And so I want to, first of all, say thank you for that. It's truly a period of no good deed goes unpunished. An anecdote, I had a friend this weekend, professional, but above 65, coming from Pasadena, and got to the front of the line at Dodger Stadium, was one of the first ones, and then complained about the time. And it was like, really? Like, you're gonna complain about how long you had to wait? You're the first in line? You're a professional, you live in Pasadena, and like, you're gonna complain about the city and about the mayor. And it's like, it's not even our job, right? He has his own city, his own department, but it's where we're at. So first of all, let me say that. Chief, let me say the same to you. Thank you, because this is in many respects beyond the call of duty. And of course, I think the mayor should, as I remind him every day, should be thanked for his leadership, because we, the city, we don't have a health department, and it's probably something we should give serious thought to, much like the city of Pasadena or Long Beach or San Francisco, one then that could collaborate within a broader system that's set up by the county, this incredible county, larger than I think 40 states, and with an infrastructure that's massive and a landmass that's massive. So that's our context. Let me double down on the comments of President Pro Tem De Leon on this question of being more strategic and more targeted. We have an abundance of data. There's no question about it. And everyone has an incredible argument for their group first. Incredible. You know, their location in the economy, their specific demographic, where they ripple, et cetera. We're in a compelling moment. And the real challenge is, and I was listening to the news all morning, we simply don't have enough supply. And so we are given the very hard choices of prioritizing who goes first. And then we have a supply that has a 6-hour shelf life. And so that's really difficult when you consider all of that. The super centers are well known and people go there. But let me share with you the demographics of my district, and as an argument for doubling down on the more strategic approach. Not only do I have the single Latina worker, but she also lives in a multi-generational household, 2, 3, or 4 generations. This is true in 8, 9, 10. This is true in the 1st and the 14th. I mean, it just is. We have the density of Manhattan in parts of the city. This is Latinos, this is African Americans, this is really a part of the city that's almost completely separate than as was referred to as the Tony communities on the west side, west of the 405, in the valley, parts of the valley, not all the valley, other parts of the city, where frankly, it's just like, it's so stark. So let me advocate for those where we're over 65. We don't have internet access. We don't have capacity if we had internet access. It's multi-generational. There's different languages, different capacity. There's a lack of mobility. And yet it is the household that has the greatest density and perhaps the greatest workforce participation. And so it is set up to be the most dangerous household. I have put out hundreds of signs in my district to identify these communities in Westlake, Pico Union, down on Washington Boulevard, Temple Beaudry. I've put up signs so that people understand that this is a very serious question. We've got to remain hyper vigilant. I'm very concerned about people thinking that because we're going to open up that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, but there's a distance to go before we get there. And so I want to be very specific with you and ask you to give us some measure of the changes that will be made because they're needed. So for example, I heard you exhort people to use the internet because we don't want to use the phones. But for that population and that household, the phone is the only communication device. It's the only effective communication device. So there needs to be a call center, 24/7, multiple languages, that has a capacity to receive that phone call. Because if not, we're going to lose the most vulnerable people. And it will undermine our efforts throughout the city. Because out of that household, I guarantee you, is someone who's going to go clean the household in the Mortoni community. And it just is the reality. It's going to be someone who's going to go clean the small business, help set up the new open area restaurants, and going to be serving the food and making the food. So if we don't get the most vulnerable, we undermine the entirety of our efforts. It's just that simple. And so we've got to concentrate the resources there. And so I just want you to talk to us about the measures of how we increase these call centers. One of the disasters...
Mr. Cedillo, I need you to watch your time. I need to move on to the next member. Do you have a question for Dr. Ferrer?
So my question is this. Talk to me about the measures of going from the request for people to use the internet to expanding our call centers. What's the degree, the percent, the amount of expansions we're going to have on the call centers? What languages are we using, and what's going to be the expansion of the hours? Because my people in my district do not fit in neatly into some of these other areas to engage. And yet, as I said, 8, 9, 10, 1, 14, 13 as well, the most vulnerable areas of the city. And if they're not taken care of, it will continue to spread throughout the city.
Dr. Ferrer, I appreciate your time. I also have another 7 members on the queue, so if we can please move through this quickly, I need to get to the rest of the members.
Okay,
Dr. Ferrer,
thank you so much. We do have a call center. We set it up immediately when we realized we were going to start vaccinating people 65 and older. It runs right now from 8 in the morning till 8:30 at night. We have language capacity embedded in that call center. We're actually linked now to 211, so we can manage pretty much all the languages. We've added dozens and dozens of workers pretty much every day. The capacity is still overwhelming. Most days we're averaging, over 4,000 or 5,000 calls to the line. People can leave their numbers and we do call them back. We agree completely, council member, that there are many people who cannot, for a variety of reasons, use a computer-based system for making appointments. As soon as this was opened up to non-healthcare workers, we did set up that call center in acknowledgement of that. And we continue to work hard to try to make the call center better, and we'll continue to do that. We have to keep that call center functional. We have to actually get it to be more functional so that we're able to get to people's calls in a more timely manner. I appreciate your concern and I share your concern. Thank you.
And finally, the last thing, Madam President, is I want to note, in addition, that the FQHCs, particularly in my district, are vital and the trusted partners. So it's the Clínica Oscar Romero's, the Ultimeds are key in terms of for the distribution, both for the test and for the vaccine.
And we agree, and we're contracted. I mean, we're helping everybody sign up that's a federally qualified health center. And at this point, by next week, all of the federally qualified health centers across the county that are registered with the state will be getting doses for them to be able to go ahead and start vaccinating their patients.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. O'Farrell?
Thank you, Madam President. Dr. Ferrer, thank you so much for your leadership on this all these months. It has been exceptional. And you've done the city and the county proud across the country. So we're very grateful to your work. And Chief Terrazas, likewise for you and the fine men and women, the LAFD. Your collaboration has really been the example. And so we're deeply appreciative. just a quick round robin of questions, just to assure the public in case any remaining insecurities still exist. Just wanted to hear a confirmation that we are vaccinating regardless of immigration status in relation to all existing and future protocols. That is accurate, correct?
That is completely accurate. There are multiple ways of showing some identification, including, bills, letters, et cetera, but nobody should hesitate for a moment to get vaccinated because of their immigration status. And everyone should know you will never be asked a question ever at any of the sites about your immigration status.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ferrer. Let's see, how does the county plan to vaccinate people experiencing homelessness and track to make sure that they receive their second dose of the vaccine?
It's an excellent question. Right now, we're concentrating on vaccinating people experiencing homelessness who are 65 and older. We're starting to work through what we call our isolation and quarantine facilities, where many of them reside, our Project Room Key facilities, along with the cities, where we also have placed vulnerable people experiencing homelessness so that they're not exposed to others, particularly if they're older or they have underlying health conditions. We're starting with them, our partners in this, and I want to thank them as the Department of Health Services and their team. We are hopeful that in the next couple of weeks, we will have a new vaccine, the Johnson & Johnson one-dose vaccine, that will make it a lot easier for us to work in the encampments. Really is important that people do get the 2 doses. If we can get a confirmation that Johnson & Johnson will be applying for emergency use authorization next week, in the next couple of weeks, we will wait until we go into the encampments until we get those first doses that are one-time doses. That'll make it a lot easier to work in the encampments. But we do have plans, of course, to work both with those who are sheltered and those who are unsheltered and are experiencing homelessness.
That's so encouraging. And are you working with the many, there's a whole spectrum of outreach organizations that are by and large regularly visit the same encampments, and there is a distribution sort of partnership right there.
Yeah, we always have to work through the existing networks. I mean, we don't have capacity ourselves, but this is trying to get the right people registered and approved with the state system as a provider so that we can in fact make sure they're getting allocated doses. I do want to say one reason why the Department of Health Services is our partner on a lot of this is they have teams out there and they're embedded out there as well. And we're able to use them to make sure that the teams that are going to be doing these outreach, particularly once we get that 1 dose vaccine, will be able to help us with the distribution. We could never do this ourselves, ever.
Right, and wonderful. And please let those entities, feel free to have them contact the council offices, especially our field offices, because we can probably serve as some on-the-ground intel if you think it'll be beneficial, and I think that possibility exists.
So it's super helpful. Like any way you can help identify the partners that are trusted in your communities and can serve as vaccinators. If you can get that information to us, those are often the best way for us to sort of really expand this network.
Thank you, and please let us know what channel or contact information that would be, and we will get right on that.
Sure, it'll be through Joshua, and we'll make sure we send that out.
Wonderful, thank you. Currently, what can you tell us about what's the percentage of frontline medical workers, firefighters, police officers, sanitation workers, and essential private sector workers that are currently vaccinated?
The only group that's allowed to be vaccinated right now in terms of the workforce are healthcare workers, and that's a broad array of healthcare workers, and it includes people working in healthcare facilities who have a possibility of an exposure. So the people who may be the custodians, the food workers, they're all counted as healthcare workers in that healthcare system. They're allowed to have been vaccinated, as have EMTs and paramedics. So anybody who's, obviously, again, in the health field. Those are the only workers so far that have been prioritized for vaccination. We would estimate at this point that probably close to 500,000 healthcare workers have been vaccinated. Many of them are starting to get their second doses. I want to note there are a couple of populations that we're still trying to make sure they get in. Home healthcare workers, for example, they are considered healthcare workers. It's a much more diffuse network. Many, as you know, many home health workers are in fact family members, but they do in fact, they are licensed and permitted to work in that field. So we are trying to get all of those folks in as well still.
Wonderful. Last question, Madam President. Dr. Farrar, do these mobile teams that you discussed earlier, do they or will they be able to make home visits to seniors that are homebound, or any other individual for that matter that is homebound that want the vaccine?
We're going to have to figure out the best way to work with people who live independently in isolated areas that are homebound. We're going to concentrate in this first go round with our mobile teams to go to settings where there are multiple people who are older and homebound, including, you know, our senior housing developments. We're going to be looking at our senior centers. We do have a partnership that we're working on with our home health care workers, many of whom provide services to homebound seniors, to see if there's a way we can, you know, some of those home health workers actually take those homebound seniors to their doctor's appointments, to the pharmacy, et cetera. So we're trying to see if there's a way, even right now, to partner and have home health care workers bring with them a homebound senior to be able to get their vaccination at whatever site they're going to get vaccinated. But yes, I mean, we know it's a problem we have to solve.
Wonderful, thank you. And I look forward to my office, our offices in general, being a resource to help in any way, especially as more vaccines become available in the coming days and weeks. Thank you so much. Thank you.
No, thank you for all your support, Council Member.
You bet.
Thank you, Mr. Lee.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you, Dr. Ferrer, for being here today to answer our questions and clear up a lot of the confusion that even we have with the ongoing vaccinations. I think you've answered all my questions regarding the vaccinations. My questions are more for like the CDC had a report yesterday regarding the safe precautions that we could take for reopening schools. Have you had a chance to look at that? Is this something that you agree with? Do you think that this may be a path for our schools to open if they could provide the different things that the guidelines state?
So, you know, we are under the state's framework for reopening schools, and there are extensive requirements for schools to reopen. As folks may remember, we did ask that everybody, as a strong recommendation, not a requirement, please keep everybody home until the end of January. Most school districts did in fact adhere to that. That was, you know, we just had so much community transmission that even although there's very little, very small numbers of people who were in fact infected at schools, that number grew significantly in December, like, you know, huge. It was very easily contained because we have good protocols at the schools that are open, but when there's a lot of community transmission, there's transmission in every place that's opened. They will all, I think, many of them will be reopening at the beginning of February. There are two groups of students that are allowed back at schools right now under the state protocol. Those are students who have high needs that cannot be met through virtual learning. Schools, we have over 1,700 schools across the county that are open for services for high needs students. There's a very strict protocol that they're under, including the cohorting of those students in very small groups. Those students, some of them have continued to get services. Many of them will resume getting services in February. That has, you know, that doesn't matter what tier you're in. You could be in the purple tier or any other tier, and you're allowed to have all schools open for services to their high needs students in a cohorted small group fashion. The other schools that are allowed to be open in LA County while we're in the purple tier are those schools that have a waiver that's been approved by both us and the state. And I believe there's close to, I want to say 300 schools that have waiver applications. Those right now are for grades TK through grade 2. Those students are allowed. The state has set a threshold for reopening schools for both students grades 7 through 12, and have expanded what we'll be allowed to do for students in grades TK through 6. So let me first go to 7 through 12. Those classrooms and those students will not be able to return to schools until our daily case rate drops below 28,000 cases per 100,000 individuals. Right now, our case rate, I think, is about 45 cases per 100,000 individuals, the daily case rate. So we have a ways to drop before we be allowed to think about expanding services for any schools. I think in addition, the state right now is saying that for students in grades 7 through 12, we actually need to get to the red tier and not be in the purple tier. We're trying to get clarification if those schools can reopen with all of the new protocols and the case rate drops to 28, would that opportunity be expanded? For schools with students TK through grade 6, as soon as our case rate gets below 28 new cases per 100,000 residents, we will be able to open up those schools for services to their students. They have a lot of attestations and forms that they need to fill out. They have some Cal OSHA requirements that they need to meet. We will be aligned with the state on all of those requirements. But I would imagine when that case rate drops, we will have a lot more schools that may decide to reopen. Again, this will be for grades TK through grade 6. That's the first thing that will be able to come online. But our case rate needs to drop to 28 new cases per 100,000 individuals before we can expand that opening.
Okay, thank you, Dr. And you mentioned earlier that you were meeting with the restaurant associations to guidelines, because I think I speak for all the council members when they say we're just getting a lot of questions about reopenings. A lot of people are confused whether it's the same guidelines that we're using or if they expanded. So, and also, I was wondering if you've ever discussed with the Restaurant Association, their business model relies on, a lot of advanced buying of different supplies and food. Is there anything that you see that if they were to put the proper safety precautions on, I think that we'd be willing, even if they were a little bit more extreme on the safety side of it, willing to make that investment if they knew that they would be able to operate no matter what, situation we are in. A lot of the restaurants, made huge investments for the outdoor dining just to have them close down, a week later. And so there's a lot of just sort of that frustration. Do you foresee that we could ever reach that, or if there's ever any type of, measures that they could take to ensure the safety of everyone?
It's such a good question. And, I hope like everyone, we don't have to continue to go backwards sometimes, because that's really what happened is we went backwards. But, today I'm going to report over 300 people died. That's one day count of people dying. That's because deaths are in fact a lagging indicator. Cases were way up as of even at the beginning of the month, and that's going to continue to hurt us in terms of the number of people that are going to continue to die a few weeks out. Our responsibility really is to be the honest broker here and to say to people, we want to do everything that we can so that our economy recovers, but it cannot be at the expense of creating untenable situations where there is so much risk for transmission, and that risk then translates to people needing to be hospitalized, overwhelming our healthcare system, which is what just happened, and causing sort of the devastation that losing someone you love results in for all of our families. So I can never make that promise, ever. What I do want to say is, and plead with the businesses, is the protocols are there because they make sense, there's evidence behind them, and they need to be followed. The cutting of corners is really what creates the problems for us. You all saw the same pictures I did at our restaurants during both the NBA finals and during the World Series, where people were crowded, holding their drinks, standing up, not wearing any face coverings, watching a TV at a restaurant, all packed in. That's not the rule. You can't be standing and eating and drinking. You can't be gathering in crowds. That's where transmission happened and will happen again. So everyone really needs to understand that as hard as these rules are, it is what allows us to have confidence that sectors can reopen. But if the rules aren't followed, we'll see that in the numbers. So we'll just have more transmission. So my urge is like play by the rules, everybody play by the rules.
No, I understand. That'd be great.
And business responsibility. And that makes it a lot easier for things to stay open.
Absolutely. There's just obviously a lot of frustration. So I'm seeing businesses reopen now when they shouldn't be, with a lot less, safety measures, and a lot of small businesses who see the larger businesses, the Walmarts, the Targets, who have grocery stores, open up their entire businesses, where they have a small business that they can manage, mask wearing, the social distancing at a much better rate than what I'm seeing at some of these larger places. And so it's that frustration where they're just deciding, well, I have no choice. I'm just going to reopen.
All retail is allowed to open. All retail.
I know, I understand that. I'm just talking about as we move into different tiers and different times.
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Lee.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Blumenfield?
Great, thank you. And Chief, Mr. Garcia, Dr. Ferrer, thank you all for being here. So appreciate that. I know we're short on time, so I'm going to just jump into a couple of quick questions because a lot of this stuff has been covered. First, on the vaccinations, and Mr. Bonin sort of got at this question, but are we bound by the state's age requirement, or can we, after we get past the 1B, which you explained, can we add groups, that we feel are particularly vulnerable to the age thing? Do we have any flexibility, or is that preempted by the state?
I think it's, we have a little bit of flexibility now. I mean, we can't expand to groups that aren't permitted at this point, but as I noted earlier, we could be more surgical in sort of who within a group gets prioritized. I do want to be honest and say, with the state's system that they're putting in place, where they'll be centralizing those allocations and they'll be using the centralized registration system, there will not be an opportunity for counties to have their own prioritization.
So once we get past phase 1A and B, it's strictly by age.
I don't know I have not seen the governor's exact plan. I know he did announce that it was going to be by age after we finished in phase 1B tier 1, but I would need to, I can't answer that. We'd have to go to the state.
Gotcha. No, I just trying to just be quick on the two other questions. One, the ICUs. I don't quite get it. I mean, we're still at zero capacity, and I feel like we're moving, but we're at zero capacity. That is dissonance in my brain, and then I hear that we may be headed for greater capacity in a few weeks. What do you see on the ICU front, and how does that work with the openings?
That's a great question. So the state used a regional metric that was what we would call an adjusted measure for ICU capacity. If you actually look at LA County's ICU capacity right now, I think today it's 11%. So there are 11% of the beds in the ICUs are technically open. That's a very small margin, and it really doesn't account for the fact that people go in and out of the ICU on an hourly basis. So we have a slim margin, but I do want to say that the rate that the state was using, that read 000 every day, was what they were calling an adjusted rate. And really, the reason I want to point this out is what they were accounting for was the percent of patients in the ICU that were COVID-19 patients. And if you were over 30%, you lost points for being over 30%. So if more than 30% of the patients in the ICU across a given region were in fact COVID patients. So we've been hovering at more like 50%, for example, in LA County. They made that adjustment that really drove those rates down to zero. So it really was a measure not just of available beds, available staff beds, but it was also a measure of what percent of folks were in the ICU that were COVID-19 positive. With all of our hospitals at this point still not engaging in other elective procedures, non-essential elective procedures, the need for other patients to be using those ICU beds has somewhat diminished, and that will again allow us to have this greater capacity across the county. The state ran a complicated algorithm and determined that 4 weeks from now, based on our case numbers and some accounting for what that R factor is, that I know, that R effective factor, you've all heard about that, the projection of how much are we transmitting in our communities. They've determined that the region should be above 30% capacity for available beds in the ICU 4 weeks from now. But I do agree with you. It's hard to understand that metric being used. That's something we'll see 4 weeks from now as the platform for the reopening. I want to say the reason that happens is hospitalizations are also what we call a lagging indicator. It will take them longer to go up than cases, and then it will take them slightly longer to go down. But as long as cases continue to go down, hospitalizations will continue to go down. So we'll be in trouble, and we know we'll be in trouble when we see a sustained pattern of our number of cases going back up, because that will automatically result in more people needing to be hospitalized. 10 to 12% of our cases over the last, I don't want to say 6 months now, those people have required at some point in time required a hospitalization. So you can look at your cases and you can do some predictions a couple of weeks after people get positive. Somewhere around 10% of them are going to end up requiring a hospitalization. So if our cases continue to go down, our hospitals will move back to more normal operating conditions. If our cases start going back up again, we're in trouble. And that means collectively we're in trouble. We cannot sustain another significant increase in our cases because it will translate to another surge for the hospitals.
Okay, and then lastly, just to follow up on the school issue, and I appreciate what you were saying before. Just help me with what do we tell folks from a health perspective who say, who point out this dissonance or this dichotomy where we're opening up card clubs, but we're not opening up schools, and folks say, well, how can that be? And where, is that a reflection of priority, or is that a reflection of some sort of science?
I think the issue has always been at schools that you need to have community transmission rates down low enough that you feel pretty confident you'll be able to prevent a lot of transmission. And that includes transmitting from students to teachers as well. So who may be more likely to be asymptomatic and have less illness. I think we have demonstrated across the county that if the protocols are followed, that there's a fair amount of safety in schools that have reopened. But it did not protect an increase in cases at schools when community transmission rates got really high. So I want to be just completely transparent about this. All the way through the middle of November, the numbers of cases, of positive cases at schools that were open was really, really low. And the number of outbreaks that we experienced all the way through that, schools started reopening in September, all the way through the middle of November, we had 24 outbreaks, which are 3 or more cases at schools. And of those, 20 of them were less than 5 cases, so very little transmission. Between the middle of November and the middle of December, that number jumped to 75 outbreaks at schools. And we had many more situations where there were more than 5 people who had been infected at a school site. Although we never had really large outbreaks, we did have, and we have to be honest about the data. Once community transmission rates got really high, it was just much easier for people to come in to the school environment And even with all of the precautions that they were taking, there still was some transmission there, as happens in every single sector. Healthcare workers everywhere, no matter where you looked, in the middle of November till the end of December, we saw huge increases in outbreaks at all work sites. So the state, and we are under the state's rules, the state has set this threshold for when schools can go ahead and expand what they're doing in terms of offering children to come back into the classrooms. We do have some schools here that have waivers that were approved, and they'll be able to open those. And we're going to go ahead with allowing those waivers that we had approved. The schools hadn't yet reopened. The state has a rule that says if you didn't reopen before the stay-at-home order, you can't reopen now. Those schools will be able to reopen because we asked them not to reopen in January. But we're still under the state's guidance. I do think it will not be long for us to get to 28 new cases a day per 100,000 people if we stay on the course we're on. If everybody plays by the rules, these schools will reopen. But I do understand the frustration as other sectors have reopened. Again, very different circumstances, how long people are in other sectors, and who, again, it's always this issue about needing to make sure that that entire community, parents, students, teachers, and staff all feel very comfortable coming back into a school environment because they feel like there's a lot of safety there.
When you say it will not be long to get to that 28 per 100,000 caseload, what does that mean in terms of?
I think if we continue to decrease, we might hit that number in 2 to 3 weeks.
Wow.
We dropped pretty significantly just in 1 week. I think we were at 75 cases per 100,000 a week ago. And I think now we're at 45. These are adjusted rates that the state uses.
Dr. Ferrer,
Is that partially because of the vaccination, or is that, what do you attribute the rapid decrease to?
People are playing by the rules and the holidays are over.
Okay, Dr. Ferrer, how long do you have? I've got 4 more members on the queue. Mr.
I have
Blumenfield,
5 more minutes.
Mr.
Do you think
Blumenfield,
we
I
could
need to
get
move
through
on.
this in 5 minutes. I'm late for a 12
I
o'clock
appreciate that.
call,
Thank you,
sorry.
Mr. Harris Dawson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Dr. Ferrer. I'll cut to the chase. Thank you to everybody. Everybody's great and best work. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I just need to tell these folks that I'm 5 minutes late. So.
Yes, I've got 2 more members, Mr. Harris Dawson.
My
and
first
then
question
2
is
more.
for the chief, so I can ask the chief while you're doing that, if that's okay, Madam Chair. Chief Terrazas, you talked about the mobile units. Do you say the county gets vaccine dosages on Monday? How quickly could you deploy the mobile units to neighborhoods to get people vaccinated?
Well, thank you for the question. I think our first effort will be to do the most good for the most people. So that would be the mega sites. And I think the next step after that would be to equip our mobile teams with clinicians who can do the shots in partnership with CORE. So to answer your question, sir, dependent upon the availability of vaccines, I could see transitioning that effort in the next month or so.
A month. I would just put out to you that that's a long time to wait, given how certain communities are going to be, frankly, dependent upon the mobile units. So, again, I would just request that we try to achieve a state of readiness so that when the vaccine drops, we don't have to wait an additional month before we get the mobile units out. The big sites are great, but as has been discussed earlier, the big sites serve who they serve, and tend to reinforce some of the inequities that the pandemic has exposed or laid bare. So I would just ask that we prepare now to get mobile units out, assuming that the vaccine dosages will come any day. Because I think in my district, I can speak for South LA, there are entire neighborhoods that are not going to the Forum. They're not going to any place with big crowds of people. They're just not doing it. And so the only way we're going to get them vaccinated is if we bring it to them. The second thing in kind of the same vein, and this is more for Dr. Ferrer. So we have this network that folks have invested in, and you've been a part of building, helping to build here in South LA, a federally qualified health clinics in the neighborhood. So I want to emphasize this because people in the community, and I get a little frustrated that particularly Black people, but I think people of color's distrust of the medical system is some kind of pathology, as if, you know, you have people in their 20s walking around worried about the Tuskegee experiment for 100 years ago. No, people are not concerned about Tuskegee. They're concerned about a month ago, a Black doctor in a hospital in Indiana told them she was sick, and they said, nothing's wrong with you, and she went home and died of COVID. Like, that's the kind of thing that people experience on a day-to-day basis, and it's the reason why they don't trust the healthcare industry. So you have a vaccine that people don't trust, and they were asking them to go to people that they don't know. Our clinics solve at least one half of that equation. You can go to people you know in your neighborhood. But it seems like our investment is really weighted to the large centers. And I want to know if there's something we can do to even that out. I know the clinics that I've been to are getting about 1/5 the dosages that they have the capacity to distribute in the community. I will also note, just anecdotally, before I close, I visited a large site in our area. So I visited the Forum, I visited Crenshaw Christian Center when we were doing it there. I'm just gonna be frank about it. The people at those sites did not reflect the community. I went across town to St. John's Wellness Clinic on Hoover, and the opposite was the case. And so I just want to, again, press for more of investment, but I want to hear your opinions about the assumptions we're operating with and how we can move forward. And that concludes my questions, Madam Chair.
Appreciate you. Thank you, sir. Dr. Ferrer, I've got 2 more members we really need to get to. Ms. Rahman, I know you've been waiting.
I
Sure.
will respond just quickly. I appreciate the council members' concerns and actually share them, and want to make sure that as we're doing the allocations now, we are honoring the allocations that are going to the small providers in the neighborhoods. I totally agree with you. It's so much easier to go to somebody you trust. It's going to be a really, really large hurdle, and I think significant barrier if we're not allocating enough doses to the federally qualified health centers and the smaller clinics and the independent pharmacies who are already in communities that have been hardest hit, have trusted relationships, and people can go there and not just get vaccinated, but get their questions answered. I think the second part of this is everybody has the right to make their own decision about whether or not they want to get vaccinated. We need to make sure people have good information, it's reliable information, it's from a source that they trust, so that they can make that decision for themselves and the people that they love. And that's the second part of the equation here, is we have to get out information that people can look at, feel confident in, talk to people that they trust, so that they make the decision that they feel is right for them. And I said this yesterday, and I want to repeat it. Just because someone says, I don't want to get vaccinated today, doesn't mean that they might not want to get vaccinated a month from now. And it's okay if people want to wait, and they need to take their time to make that decision. And we should all respect that. It is, we obviously wouldn't be asking people to get vaccinated if we didn't think it was safe and if we didn't think it was effective. But we also want to respect everybody's individual rights to have good information and be able to make the right decision for themselves. So,
Ms. Rahman?
Hi, I'll keep it really brief. And thank you to both of you for coming here today and sharing your time with us. I think I want to echo some of the dissonance around the speed of the reopening and what we're expecting from people. I think it's really hard to ask people, don't change your behaviors, but a lot of rules are changing around where you can go and what you're allowed to do, but don't change your behavior because that's going to keep our cases down. And I think that's just a hard message to convey to people as we're talking about it. And I just wanted to share that with you in this open forum. It's not, it's not necessarily something you need to comment on, but I did want to ask you, we're seeing a lot of disparities around, racial disparities around vaccines. And I wanted to ask you, as a city council body, what is it on that public education piece that you were just talking about? What is it that we can do? What is it that our offices can do? Is it sending out mail? Is it making phone calls? Is it, staffing phone banks? Is it other means of getting the information out about this? How can we support efforts in actually making sure that more people are excited about taking the vaccine, that the vaccine information is getting to people about how to get to it? What is it that you need from us?
Yeah, thank you so much, Council Member, and I really appreciate your offer of support. I think there's a variety of things that Council members can do and also can push us to be better at. One thing is you are trusted by many of the people in your communities that you're serving, and we'd like to use that trust. If you hold a town hall and want to have one of our physicians come and speak about the vaccine and speak about vaccine safety, we're always happy to do that. If you have capacity and are sending out information routinely to the people in your districts, to the residents in your districts, and you want to include information about vaccines, please contact our office. We're happy to create, and we have a lot of materials. We're happy to have you disseminate our materials. They are all in, I think, 13 different languages at this point. So, anything that you're sending out and you want to use your ability to communicate with residents to amplify the message, we're always happy to take you up on that. And then I think the third thing is we know that one of the best ways for people to feel more confident in this vaccine is to hear it from other folks who are in fact trusted by them. So we're working a lot with the faith-based communities. We're working a lot with local providers, with social service agencies. And if you know that there are other leaders in your community and want to just invite us to talk with the other leaders in your community so we can answer their questions and they can feel better informed, so that they can have discussions with the people that they're connected to, we'd love to do that as well.
Thank you.
Mr. Ridley Thomas.
Madam President, briefly stated, I appreciate the presentation and the questions that have been posed. Might I suggest that a crisis warrants unprecedented collaboration and the building of consensus. I take today's presentation by the three persons here as a step in that direction. The more the state, the more the county, the more the city more effectively communicate and collaborate, the better results we will achieve, the more effective we can be in delivering the kind of services that we all wish to see happen. The second point, Madam President, is simply this. Equity is the order of the day. We speak the language of anti-racist sensibilities and policies. Institutional forms of racialized disparities are upon us. Dr. Ferrer initiated 3 years ago the Center for Equity in the Department of Public Health. Might I suggest that template be made available to the city of Los Angeles in the pursuit of collaboration in connection with COVID-19, both testing centers as well as the vaccinations. Those things seem to me to be fundamentally important. They are in place, and if we could just communicate more effectively, collaborate, I think our constituents will be the beneficiaries. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you very much. Dr. Ferrer, I know you need to get going, so I'm going to go ahead.
I just want to thank
Yes.
Council Member Ridley Thomas. I 100% agree, and we're really, I feel very blessed to have a lot of support and really pledged to do whatever I can to make sure that the collaboration is strong. I do like the notion that when we're most effective when we're unified, and I'm happy to share the resources we have around our work to really advance equity and agree that we have in front of us the most stark example of a health inequity that we're all living through. And if there's any there's no greater imperative at the moment than to actually figure out a way to eliminate the disaster that we're seeing in terms of gaps in people's outcomes based on their race, ethnicity, or the level of poverty. So thank you so much, Supervisor.
Dr. Ferrer, and I know you need to get going, so I'm going to leave you just with a couple of thoughts really, really quickly, not questions, but suggestions. I really am concerned about our elderly and how they're supposed to navigate this very complicated appointment website that a lot of our folks are having a real challenge with, particularly those who do not speak English or don't have anyone to access technology. So if there is a way to come up with a wait list for anyone who's 65 or older or having these challenges, we need to do that immediately, as well as for any vaccine that is left over after a full day. How do we get rid of this, this line that is forming on some of our vaccine sites and make it readily available to the people who live there, our most vulnerable members of those communities? I think we need to come up with a different system to reach them so they can rush over and get the vaccine as soon as possible. I really recommend that. We think we need to do that and do it smartly and do it effectively so that we can capture our elderly and our most vulnerable in the communities that these sites are vaccinating. So with that, Dr. Ferrer, I really appreciate you being here. I know you have to get going. I know we've got Mr. Garcia who wants to also say a few words, but I want to turn it over to Mr. Koretz to close, and Mr. Garcia, if you want to add anything. You want me to go to you first? Mr. Garcia, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam President, and I want to thank Councilman Koretz for the invitation, and I want to actually piggyback on Councilmember Marguerite Lee Thomas's comment about collaboration and just reassure the council that, the hospitals certainly appreciate, the hospital community appreciates the leadership of Dr. Barbara Ferrer and her staff at the Department of Public Health. Just to let you know, we are in daily communication with the Department of Public Health, and not only with Public Health, but also with the California Office of Emergency Services, the California Department of Public Health, and the California Emergency Services Authority, as well as the LA County EMS Agency, which is led by Kathy Chedester. And I have to tell you that it's been phenomenal. The lines of communication, the ability for us to come together on a regular basis to identify issues, challenges, and then and clearing those barriers to support the hospitals. I know Dr. Blumenfield was asking about the issues of ICU capacity, and just want to let you know that through our collaborative efforts with the state and the county, there have been additional beds, ICU beds that have been opened in LA County. There's a few beds. There's a hospital in San Fernando Valley that's added to state resources. They've added additional beds there, as well as down in the southeast area of the county, they've added additional med-surg and ICU beds to, again, be the backup valve for the hospitals as they're surging, that they can be able to move patients into those settings. And so it's really been about collaborating, like I said, looking at the barriers that hospitals encounter towards discharges, and really looking to, again, public health to help us in really knocking those barriers down and moving the individuals into the appropriate settings. And so I think, one of the questions I have been asked is, how can the city help the hospitals? And I would say that one way that the city can support the hospitals is during the surge, because at one point hospitals were caring for about over 8,000 people who had COVID. And yes, the numbers are going down, and we still need to make further headway in this. But I think in terms of the discharges, supporting hospitals is, during COVID, many of the homeless shelters decreased their capacity to institute social distancing, which is needed and it was appropriate. But I don't think that there was a plan instituted to make up for that shortfall that took place in those settings. And so I think that is an area that hospitals could really use the support of the city, is looking at additional venues that could provide shelter. And I'm not talking about shelter for people with medical needs, like recuperative care or interim housing for people who require isolation or quarantine, because that is being already offered through the county. I'm simply talking about an individual who is in their 30s, who doesn't have an underlying chronic condition, who doesn't qualify for Project Room Key or Project Home Key, but simply an individual, 30s, relatively healthy, who simply needs a roof over their head. And that's kind of if that's an area that the city could support the hospitals in an effort to expedite the discharge process, and that affords the ability for the 911 responding agencies to being able to bring additional people, and we can move people through the system. That would be greatly appreciated. And that I also want to just take this time to recognize our 911 responders, as well as all our healthcare providers throughout the county, the city and the county, for the extraordinary work that they've done during this period. And I know there's some light at the end of the tunnel, but there's still much more work that needs to be done.
Thank you. We also have Chief Terraza, who also needs to leave. I want to thank you, Chief Terraza, for joining us this morning. Actually, now it's afternoon, but I appreciate your time. I'm going. Did you want to say a few words before you have to go, Mr. Go ahead, Chief.
Madam President, real quickly, Councilmember Harris Dawson made a very good suggestion. I told him about a month, and that was dependent upon vaccine availability and civilian staffing. I've been texting, and we're going to make an ask. We are making the ask as we speak to the state to get additional vaccines so we can transition our mobile teams to vaccination teams. The second point is Council Member Rahman. She asked about how can we assist with communication. We will notify each council office of each mobile team on the dates and the locations they will be active. So if each council office could put out that message, that'll help increase the people that would show up on the date that the mobile team is in the community. That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, and thank you for joining us. Mr. Corrett, to close.
Mr. Yes, I have a second question that I wanted to ask of Chief Terrazas and Mr. Garcia. And it was part of the original impetus for asking for this hearing. At the time, we had days where we had 19,000 cases. We were having ambulances bypassing one hospital for another. We had ambulances stacked up for hours in some locations, waiting for admittance. And we were talking about deciding who needed the most care in some of the COVID wards. We're not at that stage now because we've had a significant drop, but we probably have a theoretical opportunity for one more spike with the county reopening and with an impending Super Bowl, which could have a similar impact to what we saw over the holidays. Were we to have one last spike, what have we learned and what have we done in preparation that we didn't do in the previous spike that will help us get through it? Do we have more access to oxygen supplies and ventilators and staffing? What's happening in those regards?
This is Jaime. Speaking for the hospitals. So as I indicated earlier, there have been additional, the state has opened up, we call it alternate care site or surge beds that they've opened up to help decompress hospitals that are, experiencing significant delays. So that is a new resource that has come online. So that's, some good news in that respect. We've got, unfortunately, in the month of December, as community transmission was rapidly increasing, healthcare workers weren't immune from that. And so many of those workers are now coming back to work, and that's good news. The state has also deployed added staff that they've been able to recruit from outside the state. The Department of Defense has also deployed staff at facilities. We've got the National Guard that's been deployed at facilities, and they're rotating through different places. And so there is additional staff that has come in, particularly this month of January, to support the hospitals in that effort. So that that is all good news. And certainly hoping that, with these added resources that have been deployed, by the state as well, it would help, reduce, ambulance diversion, which I've heard has been declined significantly from what it was like in late December, early January, where there was significant ambulance diversion taking place. And so that has dropped based on information that I have seen from, county data. So that's all good news.
All right, Mr. Koretz. Thank you. And thank you,
Well,
Mr. Garcia.
And thank you to Mr. Garcia, to the chief, and of course to Dr. Ferrer and her staff for all their amazing work through this difficult period. And we look forward to working together continually in the next few months as we try to bring this crisis under control. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, sir. And that concludes our presentation, members. Madam Clerk, what's next?
Council has motions for posting and referral. The motions will be posted on the city clerk's website shortly after the meeting for the public's viewing. To subscribe to receive copies of today's council motions to your email, please visit clerk.lacity.org.
Okay, posted and referred. We're going to move on to announcements. Mr. Cedillo, do you have an announcement?
Yes, Madam Chair, with Councilman Kevin De Leon, we have a resolution for a day of Juan Gomez Quinones. And so that is, I won't read you all of it. I'll read you the whereas. In all, Dr. Juan Gomez Quinones modeled for us as Angelinos the necessity of being critical of our past, to work for justice for our communities and for future generations. He dreamed of a world where children and youth walked with pride and dignity based on a strong understanding of their ancestral roots. Dr. Juan Gomez Quinones motivated us to reimagining our city for the benefit of los de abajo, rather than protecting the interests of the powerful and moneyed classes. Therefore, be it resolved with the concurrence of the mayor that by the adoption of this resolution, the City of Los Angeles hereby declares January 28th as Dia del Profesor Juan Gomez Quinones, Day of Professor Juan Gomez Quinones, and honors a great historical figure and human being. Dr. Juan Gomez Quinones was a professor, founder of Chicano Studies, the Chicano Studies movement. He's from Borough Heights, grew up at 5th and Grande Vista, went on and was a undergrad professor and professor at UCLA for the entirety of his life, well renowned in the area. Served as a trustee for the CSU system, served at many appointed posts, worked and mentored a young man from One Stop Immigration, two young men named Fabian Nunez and Kevin De Leon, as he was on the board of their employer. A great Angelino, and we lost him, but we should not lose his memory, and as he would admonish us, remember our history with Juan Gomez Quinones. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, sir. Any other announcements, members? Mr. Harris,
I believe Kevin De Leon is part of this, Madam Chair.
That's noted. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you very much, Councilmember Gil Cedillo, for presenting this resolution. Chihuahuenses, Norteño, Mexicano, Chicano, Californiano, Americano. I had the privilege, such as Gil Cedillo, of meeting Dr. Juan Gomez Quinones many decades ago in the heart of Ball Heights at One Stop Immigration, an educational center where I cut my teeth politically, organizing immigrants and teaching ESL, U.S. history and civics. Now, as Gil just mentioned just a few moments ago, Juan Gomez Quinones, Dr. Juan Gomez Quinones was a respected professor at UCLA at the time. But at a very personal level, he was a board member at One Stop Immigration and Educational Center. He taught us, the value of knowing who we are, the value of knowing where we came from, the value of knowing where we want to go, and how to get there. He taught us to form policies, to move political actions, to know our cultural value, and to use it to improve the human condition for all individuals, regardless of who you love and regardless of where you come from, the color of your skin, regardless of which God you pray to, and yes, regardless of your legal status. Juan Gomez Quiñones has touched so many lives, Chicanas, Chicanos, and non-Chicanos as well, and impacted how we think about our cultural identity and how we use that to improve the human condition of all individuals. So it is a professor, a mentor, a disruptor, an activist, a resistor, a civic participant. This is the man who we learned a lot from. Más profundo pésame la familia de Juan Gómez Quiñones. Councilmember Gil Cedillo, thank you very much for introducing this resolution. And thank you very much, Madam President, for the opportunity to share a few words.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Harris Dawson, do you have an announcement?
Yes, Madam Chair. Thank you. I just wanted to take a moment with all due deference to the members of our council who have family who survived the Holocaust. Today is National Holocaust Remembrance Day. I bring it up because of the rise of intolerance and white supremacy and anti-Semitism that we see in our country in this moment at this time. History is often the best teacher. And remembering the Holocaust, I think, puts all of us in a position to take a sober and serious approach to the things that we see and the disturbances that we see in our society today, here and now. So again, shout out to all our members who had families who were impacted by the Holocaust. And even on my own staff, we have folks whose family was impacted by that horrific event in human history.
Thank you, sir. We're going to move on to adjourning motions. Mr. O'Farrell?
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to adjourn council today in the memory of Bruce M. Remick, someone who was an amazing community volunteer. I want to thank Ms. Rahman because Mr. Remick was a Council District 4 resident that I had crossed paths with and interacted with over the years, but you didn't yet get to know him because he just recently passed away. So thank you for the privilege of doing his adjourning motion. Bruce Remick was born January 7th, 1942 in Lynn, Massachusetts. Bruce graduated from Boston University with a Bachelor's of Science degree in radiology. He continued his education at Northeastern University, where he received his master's degree in anatomy. He became an instructor there until he was offered a job by Siemens Medical as a salesman for radiology equipment. In the 1970s, he was asked to continue his work in Cerritos. He then became a national sales manager and was in charge of sales from Seattle to San Diego. He retired in 1990 at his home in Hollywood, where his neighbor, then in Los Angeles Police Department volunteer Eddie Kafafian, introduced him to the LAPD. Bruce was involved with the Hollywood Community Police Advisory Board, the CPAB, Community Emergency Response Team, the CERT, assisting detectives, the National Justice Panel, and our citywide LGBTQ LAPD working group, where he volunteered for years. Bruce was a winning presence wherever he was involved, bringing the community together with public safety and law enforcement to figure out problems to make all the neighborhoods in Hollywood safer. And I would describe him as knowledgeable, a people person, a bridge builder who made an impact, helping to make the neighborhood safer, but also bridging that gap and helping regular people understand the benefits of engaging in public safety and having the kind of public safety profile that would be welcomed and building those relationships with senior lead officers, for example. He also ran his neighborhood watch. Bruce was highly valued.
When did he graduate from Belmont?
The officers across Hollywood. And Officer Julie Noni and her family, and Julie Noni is a friend and an outstanding.
Where did he go to college?
LAPD mourns his loss because his presence loomed large, and he was one of those people that you just really wanted to support who volunteer just to do great things. And this is just one of the aspects of his life that people knew about. Bruce passed away
State University
second, just a week shy of his 80th birthday. Bruce is survived by his partner of 40, Fred Levine, and his sister, Roberta Hale. May Bruce rest in peace and be an example and a shining light to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. De Leon.
Thank you very much, Madam President. On Sunday, January 10th, Boyle Heights lost a great human being. If you attended Evergreen Park, you would say we lost a legend. Eduardo Tavera, also known to many at Evergreen Park as E.T., was raised in Boyle Heights and attended Roosevelt High School class of '66. After graduating from Roosevelt, he attended LA Trade Tech and he began working for Sparklets drinking water as a mechanic. When his children became of age, he was a volunteer coach at Evergreen Park. So for over 40 years, E.T. impacted so many generations. He was a perfect example of giving back to the community. He was a father figure, a mentor coach, and a friend to the community of Boyle Heights. He participated in community cleanups as the recreational park assistant. E.T. would always have the children's best interests at heart, and E.T. would always have a smile on his face and was a champion of youth sports in Boyle Heights. He gave us wonderful memories that we will cherish in our hearts forever. So I want to thank you, E.T., for your years of service. Boyle Heights will miss you. E.T.'s memory will live in the hearts of his family, his loving wife, Alejandra, his 4 children, his 13 grandchildren, and his 1 great-grandchild. Again, another person of color, another person from Boyle Heights, another person who has died because of COVID-19.
Thank you, Mr. De Leon. Ms. Rodriguez?
Thank you, Madam President. Colleagues, today I ask that we adjourn in memory of a beloved mother, Lola, Tita, and Mameng, Carmencita Francisco Kastner, who passed away on January 13th this year. Carmencita was born on February 5th, 1939 in Manila, Philippines, to Felipe and Carolina Francisco. She was the second eldest of 7 children. She grew up during World War II, and her childhood home was burned down during the war, and the family was left with nothing. After the war, her parents were able to start a successful advertising agency, buy a new home, and put all 7 children through college. Since the family business was advertising, she did some modeling in her years on television and print ads. She was even a Vanna White of sorts on a TV game show with her father, Felipe, who was a talented musician. She was known as Miss Music Box. She was an honor student all throughout her schooling. She attended La Consolacion Elementary and High School and the University of East, where she obtained her bachelor's in business administration. She went on to graduate school to work towards her MBA when her life changed dramatically and she found out that she had an opportunity to immigrate to the United States in 1969. She was the first person in her family to move to the United States, and she petitioned everyone she could, her parents, her 5 other siblings, and their families to join her here in the United States for a better future. Family was so important to her, and she wanted to do everything in her power to keep her family together. Carmencita eventually married her sweetheart and childhood friend, Antonio Kastner, in 1973, and settled in what would be their home for the next 42 years in East Hollywood, Mr. O'Farrell, in your district. They had 2 beautiful children, Bernadette and David. She did everything she could to help support her family until her last breath. She lived frugally to afford her the opportunity to support her family in the US and the Philippines. Carmencita's life was one of tireless humility, resilience, and care. She was a prayerful woman and a devout Catholic. She was an active choir member at Immaculate Heart of Mary Church for several years. On January 2nd, she was taken to the ER for what was supposed to be a minor procedure. However, while at the hospital, she caught pneumonia. On January 13th, she passed away at Kaiser Sunset due to heart complications. Today, she's being laid to rest at San Fernando Mission Catholic Cemetery in Mission Hills. She is survived by her husband, Tony, her daughter, Bernadette, and son, David, her grandchildren, Brendan, Dylan, and Grace. She will forever be remembered by family members who, without her, may never have had the opportunity to live in the United States and the many more lives she touched. May she rest in peace.
Thank you, Ms. Rodriguez. Mr. Koretz, do you have an adjourning motion?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to adjourn in memory of an old friend of mine, Marv Helfgott, who died recently at age 92 in Palm Desert. I met him during the McGovern campaign and in a group that was formed shortly thereafter called the West Side Democratic Forum from the remnants of that campaign on the West Side. In addition to the fact that he lived in my district in Cheviot Hills for 30 years and operated a pharmacy and was an active member of Temple Isaiah, all in the same area on Pico Boulevard. He played a major role in a historic movement in California. Ironically, I read his obituary and it's not even mentioned, but he actually began the California gun control movement. In, I believe, 1973 it was, his pharmacy and he personally was robbed at gunpoint 3 times over a 3-week period. And he said, this is outrageous. It's time we did something about it. And he brought together a few folks, attorneys and others, mostly folks that were involved in his synagogue. And they drafted an ordinance to ban handguns in the state of California. There was an initiative drive. It mostly was led by his synagogue and by the Democratic Party group that I mentioned. They only got a couple 100,000 signatures, so it didn't qualify. But that was the first effort at organized attempts to create gun control in California. Another initiative was considered in the late 70s and abandoned for lack of widespread interest. After Ronald Reagan and Jim Brady's shooting, there was an initiative in 1982, which was swamped by NRA money, but that really created the momentum, and elected officials passed a number of pieces of significant legislation after that, with California being one of the leaders of the gun control movement. And this was largely at the initiation of Marvin and his early attempt. And so I didn't want that to be forgotten. He is survived by his wife, Dee Helfgott, who was also a good friend at that time, his daughter, Hallie Helfgott, son, Jason Helfgott, daughter, Cheryl Harrington, niece, Judy Smee, 3 grandsons, and 4 great-grandchildren. He was loved and cared for by many in both his home on the West Side and later in Palm Desert. And I wanted to give him this recognition and wish that he may rest in peace.
Thank you, Mr. Koretz. Mr. Cedillo, do you have an adjourning motion?
Madam Chair, I do. Can you hear me?
Yep.
My computer seems to be malfunctioning. I ask that we close in memory of a dear friend of all of ours, Ray Virches. We lost him to COVID just recently. One of the sweetest, most generous men that you'll ever meet. A man who was very subtle, very quiet and humble, a very positive force of energy. He was from the Temple Beaudry area, Filipino-Mexican American. He met his high school sweetheart, who he later married, till death do you part. He lost his wife 2 weeks after I lost mine. We were great friends. He was a philanthropist. He was a man who was involved in all the good causes. He never sought a major title or a major role in any of our initiatives or movements. He was the guy who would, pick you up late at night, carry the boxes, show up at your campaign early, go get the donuts, figure out if there was somebody who had a need, how he could organize his vast network of friends and supporters to help that person with that need. When his wife passed away, he was left with raising his son, Vincent, known as Vinny, and was just a man who was involved in everything, just simply to be of service to the community. We all know him. Just a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful human being, just in every way possible. He was, in my district, very involved in the Southwest Museum, very involved preparing to make sure that we had a good census. I mean, just a man who was civically engaged, believed in public service for the virtue of being a public servant. And we will miss him tremendously.
Thank you, Mr. Cedillo. If I can just add my name to this adjourning motion as well. I think anyone who ever met him knew that he was always the first to ask what was needed of him and always showed up to help. So I appreciate you very much adjourning in his memory. So I'd like to request that I be added to that as well. Thank you, Mr. Cedillo.
Madam President, if I too could be added, I think, he was a friend to so many of us, and he's just been a treasured friend, and this city is going to suffer that loss for some time, particularly leaders that have been, like us. Frankly, he was an early mentor. So I would please like to add my name to this adjourning motion. Mr. Cedillo, thank you so much for honoring him and the tragic loss.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Madam President, such as you and Ms. Rodriguez, please add my name as well, too.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Cedillo. Mr. Blumenfield?
Thank you. And I really appreciate Mr. Harris Dawson earlier noting that it's Holocaust Remembrance Day today. Ordinarily, we do an appropriate commemoration in council. And because we're virtual, we're not doing that. I wanted to take the time to adjourn in the memory of all of the victims of the Holocaust. It was 76 years ago today that the Auschwitz concentration camp was liberated. It was only 3 weeks ago that there were insurrectionists storming the US Capitol, some of whom were literally wearing Camp Auschwitz t-shirts, and some of whom were associated with other hate groups. 2019 marked a 4-decade high in anti-Semitic incidents, according to the ADL. And I wish I could say that that doesn't happen in LA or California, but just a year and a half ago, we had the deadliest attack on the Jewish community in this country happen just south of here in a synagogue in Poway. And that wasn't some isolated incident. There are less deadly but awful incidents happening all the time in LA. Swastikas are routinely being painted over by graffiti crews, and much worse. In light of rising anti-Semitism, it is more important than ever to remember and to teach about what happened during those years and to listen to those who remain, who actually bore witness to the atrocities. We need to remember the victims and their hopes for a better and brighter future, where people aren't subjugated, imprisoned, or murdered, and erased because of their identities. The Nazis killed 6 million Jews, more than 15 million people total. Souls that were snuffed out because they were Jewish, or because they were disabled, or because they were gay. To honor their memory, we must continue to hold haters today accountable. Edmund Burke said, "Evil triumphs when good people do nothing." Elie Wiesel, Holocaust survival Nobel Peace Prize winner, said, "No human race is superior. No religious faith is inferior. All collective judgments are wrong. Only racists make them." Let's remember all of the Holocaust victims, and let's redouble our efforts to fight against all forms of hate, and let's remain vigilant and aware of the signs that are all around us when bigotry rears its ugly head. May all of the Holocaust victims rest in peace, And may we never forget the lives that they lived and never forget the generations that could have been. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blumenfield. And this council will adjourn in the memory of the victims of the Holocaust. It's my wish that next year we can all be together so we can have a presentation that we have every year in remembrance of Holocaust Day, but also in memory of all the victims. So thank you very much for doing the adjournment. Mr. Bonin?
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, colleagues. I'd like to adjourn in memory of two really amazing men. The first, someone many of you may have known, Rabbi Alan Freeling, who worked for a long time for the city of Los Angeles, but was probably most well known for his incredible stewardship and transformation of University Synagogue in Brentwood. Rabbi Freeling died earlier this month in New Orleans, where he had retired at the age of 88. Rabbi Freeling was born in Chicago and raised in Miami, and during the civil rights movement, he really was sort of caught up in the fervor of the time and decided the best way that he could express his politics, his passions, his personal beliefs was to become a rabbi in the progressive reform practice, and he dedicated himself, he said, to the concept of radical freedom. As a newly minted rabbi, he worked for a few years in Ohio, but then was hired by University Synagogue in Brentwood, which was then a struggling synagogue. It was nearly bankrupt and had only 250 members. During his time there, he really brought to that community a spirit of activism. He more than quadrupled the size of the synagogue, really refilled its coffers and used it to support causes in the community, and founded a preschool at the synagogue. When the AIDS epidemic was hitting the country in the 80s, he really took that on as a cause, and he founded an interfaith council with an Episcopal bishop and a Roman Catholic archbishop. And his advocacy work there landed him the role of the founding chair of the Los Angeles Commission on AIDS, and he was the first chairman of what was then known as the International Association of Physicians in AIDS Care. He also was really dedicated to bringing people of different faiths and traditions together, and he facilitated a regular dialogue between Muslims and Jews, trying to bridge the divides back in the 80s and 90s. One of his bigger and tougher assignments was in 1988 when he hosted a meet and greet for local Jewish leaders and then presidential candidate Jesse Jackson, who had gotten in some controversy over some slurs he had made. Freeling brought Jackson together into what was a very tense meeting in Beverly Hills and began to broker some repairs in the relationships. And then a few years later, Freeling and Jesse Jackson co-officiated the funeral of Sammy Davis Jr. When Rabbi retired from University Synagogue, Elie Wiesel, Nobel Peace Prize winner and survivor of the concentration camps we just referred to, came and honored Freeling at his retirement after 30 years at the synagogue. When he retired, he joined the City of Los Angeles as the executive director of the LA City's Human Relations Commission. And then after that, he took on one more job, and he was deputy chief of staff for a while to Councilman Tony Cardenas, before finally retiring 10 years ago and moving to New Orleans. He was an amazing guy, a great spirit, always trying to bring people together, and he's fondly remembered here in Los Angeles. The other person I'd like to adjourn in memory of is my dear friend Ernie Frankel, who passed away at age 97 recently at his home in Los Angeles. Ernie, some of you may remember, was my honoree about 2 years ago for Veterans Day, Colonel Frankel, as I called him. He was born in Brooklyn and raised in the South, and was a veteran several times over of lots of different forms of combat, was an author and was a celebrated activist and community leader. He was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Marines and married the love of his life, Louise Lazarus Frankel, who some may remember as a longtime member of the Board of Fire Commissioners here in Los Angeles. And Ernie was stationed in the Pacific Theater in World War II, and he was a platoon commander in the invasion of Okinawa. He went back into the service during the Korean conflict, training troops for combat. Then he wrote a couple novels, Band of Brothers, which was about the war in Korea, and Tongue of Fire, which wasn't published until 1960 because it was suppressed during the heat of the McCarthy era. In 1960, he moved with his wife and his family to Southern California, and he produced films about the Apollo project and entered the world of network television. And he wrote and produced such shows as I Spy and Mannix and Mod Squad and Moving On. He remained in the Marine Reserves during that time, and in 1969 he was ordered to Vietnam, where he was on a special assignment producing films for the Marine Corps. He was later awarded the Legion of Merit by President Ford, and he retired as a full colonel in 1982, at which point he decided he needed another career, and he retired from the television industry and served on the board of the Evan Frankel Foundation, which endowed a chair at UCLA at the English department. And he was also instrumental in the establishment of the UCLA School of Law's Environmental Law and Policy program. He lived in Encino for a time with his wife, and then they moved to Mountain Gate, a neighborhood top of the mountains in Brentwood, where he really became a figure in the community, was well beloved by the neighbors, was active in the homeowners association, and was big on security issues in the community. In his 90s, he researched, wrote, and published his final novel, Gateway to Everywhere. And as he died, as I said, at age 97, he was working on starting a new one. He was a great guy, a passionate Democrat who also loved the Marines and loved Los Angeles and loved fighting for community. He will be sorely missed by all who knew him. May he rest in peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bonin. And that concludes our adjournments for today's meeting. So thank you very much. Our meeting is adjourned. Thank you.